There isn't any one thing that's different when you're talking about these issues with men versus women, but there are a whole lot of little things that add up to an enormous difference. When you're talking about the psychological, emotional, intellectual development of men and women, the path that leads toward the life of the mind, and the path that leads so many people away from the life of the mind. You know, the decisions you got to make that lead to leading a meaningful life versus a meaningless one, or that can end up with your life, frankly, being in ruins, because the stakes are very high. I mean, I'd say the leitmotif that comes up again and again when you're reflecting on the difference between being a woman and being a man in these situations is just, I know it's an overused phrase, but it is the bigotry of low expectations. That it's so rare for people to say to women, including their own parents, including their own brothers and sisters, like including their school teachers, including their boss at work. It's so rare to say to women, man up. It's so rare to say, this is on you. You got to reach a higher standard to really, have this kind of imposition, the expectation of excellence of a woman giving it 110%. I mentioned this controversy to you a couple of days ago, Melissa, came up in passing in some other conversation. We had a controversy here in Canada more than 10 years ago now, where there was a woman running for parliament. So she was a candidate in the federal parliamentary elections. These are national elections. Mm-hmm. Now, this controversy, it partly involved people's changing attitudes towards the internet and privacy, because a group of journalists had gone around and basically gathered together all of the evidence of people just having posted crap on Facebook and Twitter, and it was mostly Facebook. But they'd aggregated together the data from these different candidates in different elections, and they'd come up with some really embarrassing evidence of just how stupid they were. So this woman, she's not a kid, she's not a teenager, she's a fully grown woman, she's university educated, she's standing in elections at the highest level, and she had made a series of mind-bogglingly stupid statements about the Holocaust. Like, when you're just looking at the statements, or they're her pasting on her own Facebook, they're not anti-Semitic, they're not neo-Nazi, and she's a left-wing person, by the way. You're just looking at the statements, you're like, what? Like, what are you saying about concentration camps? Like, what? It was just boggling. And what she said in her defense, and naturally this was only after, the mainstream press caught on to this bizarre news story. What she said was that she had never heard of the Holocaust before, that when she made those comments on Facebook, she had no idea anything like this had happened. Right. And people's attitudes, before, during her own education, during her upbringing, during the vetting process of her becoming a candidate. Like, how is it that all these other people around her can be aware of how ignorant a person she is and still put her into an elite leadership role in politics? I think it has everything to do with being a woman. And those problems, they get worse when you're a good-looking woman. Now, I was saying something similar to you a couple days ago. I put up a YouTube video about Izzy Davis, right? Yeah. Now, if you don't know who Izzy Davis is, she's deleted her YouTube channel. She's deleted basically all of her social media, to my knowledge. But she used to be a famous person, and she is a conventionally attractive blonde, has a history of eating disorders, blah, 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 has a history of pole dancing, too, to be fair. So she's someone who got slim and fit enough. She's been a gym fitness instructor and a pole dancer. Mm-hmm. And her university education dealt with chemistry, biology, nutritional science. And at the end of that, she's completed her university education at an elite university in the United States of America, University of Berkeley, California. Right?
Berkeley. Yeah. Get it right, I
will. Anyway, and what she's saying is so mind-bogglingly stupid. It's showing a kind of fundamental illiteracy in the sciences and lack of familiarity with, the real basics of chemistry, biology, nutrition, of exactly her field, exactly what she got. And again, I haven't met her professors. I haven't been in the classroom with her, but I've been in a lot of classrooms with a lot of people. I've been in a lot of classrooms where the professor's attitude towards especially a good-looking white female is totally different from their attitude towards an ugly male, not especially if you're a tall, black, self-confident male, the way the professor treats you. Like for how many years did this woman just get kind of waved and nodded through her education? Yes, 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 that's good. Good for you, dear. Like kind of pat on the head, encouragement, and nobody really challenging her, nobody really holding her to a higher standard. And like, let's be honest about how it works in education. Nobody kind of contradicting her, stopping her, and jumping down her throat saying, no, why did you say, no, the fact that you said this, whether verbally or on your test, this shows that you don't really know what you're talking about. This shows there's something fundamental. It can be quite nasty confronting people in a way that draws out their ignorance and draws out what it is they still need to learn or what they've gotten wrong, or that really puts them in check and says, look, the fact that you managed to scrape through the last few exams, you may have gotten a C-, but you may have gotten an A+, but you really don't understand the fundamentals here. You're not developing the competence. In our culture, and in every culture I'm familiar with, we have this huge problem of women being held to lower standards. And it has a cumulative effect. Like when you look at people in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, maybe the boys and girls aren't so different. When you're getting up to high school and university age, the subtle way in which women are treated different is very different. And then we make this transition. So don't worry, I'm going to let Melissa take over the microphone here. I know she has a lot to say. But then we make this transition where women, the vast majority of women, are in a situation where they have the option of letting men solve all their problems in life, letting some man fall in love with you and provide you with a home and an income and shelter and everything else, of letting some man, you give up a lot in exchange, but letting some man be in charge, letting some man pay your bills. And of course, today it's very easy to visualize because of the internet, but whether you become a stripper or, you do cam whoring, you do some kind of nude show on the internet, that's a different way of suddenly having men and male sexual attention come into your life and solve all your problems for you. Now you don't think about career and earning money and education in the same way because men have come into your life. But I'm just being clear, that can be one relationship with one man. You can just get yourself one wealthy boyfriend or one wealthy husband. He can even be a poor guy who has a straight job and works hard. If you're you'd be amazed how much money, whether in England or the United States of America, how much money you make as a plumber. Just a guy who's been to trade school, become an electrician or become a plumber.
In America, if you're an electrician, you can make a lot of money.
Yeah, pipe fitter, like all kinds of jobs for men that don't require university education. Being a coal miner, working in a mine, working as a longshoreman, working at the docks is over $100,000 a year. Yeah. But anyway, a man who has no education and no elite position job, he's earning more than $100,000 a year. He has more than enough money to take some woman, and it's not just good-looking women. I've known very homely, frankly, ugly women who are still in this position where you let some man, solve all your problems for you. And now you're not holding yourself to those standards. You're not asking those questions. Okay. So that's what we made a video already. I mean, Melissa, you were a part of that. We made a video talking about advice for young men. Yeah. Right? I was on the other side of the camera. I feel you were a significant part of that. Mm-hmm. And I thought we were going to talk more about sex in that video than we did. It's all right. It was already a long video. We had a lot to say. And this is a video, by contrast, that's talking about the same issues with women. Yeah. And I think we agree in like a subtle and pervasive way with women. It's all on a higher level of difficulty precisely because other people are making it easier for you. Okay. All right. I feel like in that introduction, there was a lot covered. So you've been talking for about 9 minutes and completely emotionally exhausting 9 minutes. I do want you to be on camera. So completely overwhelming, stifling 9 minutes. There you go. Okay. Yeah. So of course I want you on camera. So I'm here. I'm have a conversation with you about this. There were a lot of different issues discussed there, but your perspective on women in education, that there are lower standards. I have talked to you quite a bit about this off camera. Like we have discussed this in various contexts. So it's not that I 100% agree with you or that my experience shows the exact same thing or that I learned the exact same thing through my experience in education. So can you give me an example where like you, from your experience when you were in class and you felt like there was a real direct difference between how a woman was treated? So I went to more than one high school and more than one university. But, one of my high schools, a very large percentage of the students were Black. So I would say minimum 30% of the students were black. Maybe in any given year, it was 30%, 40%. It was not 50%. It was not half black. It was a large, within Canada, that's very unusual. Most of Canada, black people are a small minority.
Mhm.
Anyway, so this high school, any given year, 30%, 40% of people were black. And yes, true to the stereotype, I think we had the best basketball team in the city. It was fun. I remember it was funny. People in my own family who were white, in case you didn't know, white people in my family would say, "Oh, are you on the basketball team? Or did you try out for the basketball team?" And I was like,
Right, you're tall.
"No, no." In my high school, it was all black guys on the basketball team and stuff. So within Canada, this is very unusual.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was very striking to me. I saw many examples of this. How the teachers. So my last year of high school was 5 years, not 4 years in Canada at that time, with a different system. So this is the 5th year of high school. This is kids who are university age by today's standards, right? And the way the teacher would speak to a female student was very different from a male student. And I've got to say, especially when it was a black female student.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. There was a black student, and she fancied herself a bit of a radical. Like if this had happened in 2021, she would be a young black woman involved with Black Lives Matter, that type of cause.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the black radical dissident causes of the day.
Sure.
Which at that time, KRS-One was on the radio. Wasn't such a popping time for black activism. Anyway, this isn't long enough ago that we're not talking about the Black Panthers and we're not talking about BLM either. But anyway,
Yeah.
but she was a young black woman who had some political pretensions, and she gave a presentation. It was so I think each of us were assigned to give a presentation on a different university major, something you could major in university. And I think we were given them randomly. It was something like that, like kind of spun a wheel or something. Everybody got a different thing. They had to research and talk about this major or whatever. And the one she was given was classics. So if you don't know, in English, as a university major, classics means Greek and Latin. Okay. And that's basically what it means. To simplify, it means studying ancient Greek, Latin, and the associated literature and history and politics. Right. And she gave this young black woman gave this completely surreal lecture where she was like talking about African culture and growing up black and stuff, and the meaning of the word classics and like classic rap songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But she knew it was supposed to be about college majors.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It was like, and she was not the only person who in this way like fundamentally misunderstood the assignment, which is like, no, that's like, no, do it again. Like, which is what you basically need to be told. Yeah. And when other people screwed up this way, they were told like, no, that's not the meaning of this word. That's, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And I remember it's an extreme example. The whole response of the professor was like, oh, good for you. Oh, you poor dear. Well, what you don't realize is that the word classic has more than it was this, it was the perfect example of the bigotry of low expectations.
Okay.
You're not willing to say to this person, no, do it again, try harder, give me more, give me a second. Yeah. It was just good for you. I'm so happy you showed up. Here's your prize because you ran the race at all. Really, okay. Yeah. And so this was a female teacher and a female student. I do know that, part of the problem is just, a lot of young women break down crying.
Yes.
Men do too, of course, but like where the teacher, they may have experience with that. They don't want to confront someone. They don't want to confront a young woman, whether it's a male teacher or female teacher, and just say, no, like you failed. This is bad. You have to step it up. You have to be at a higher level. You have to do this again. You know what I mean? Okay. Okay. I'll give you one more example because it's really brief and it's really surreal. I think I didn't say this in a YouTube video, but I think I said this to you. There was a very good-looking young woman. She was really strikingly good-looking in my high school. Yeah. She was white, and so this is a similar kind of assignment. Everyone was given a different founder of a religion to do a report on. So somebody got the Buddha, somebody got Jesus, and she got Muhammad. Mm-hmm. And she did the whole presentation not knowing the difference between Muhammad and Muhammad Ali. I am not joking. And everyone, like the other students, that was also, we had several black people in the audience. But like, oh my God, it's like, and even I wasn't meaning, it was like, no, like, but I remember I said it, and like other people in class were like nodding, and the teacher was like nodding. They were like okay with me. It was like, no, Muhammad Ali and Muhammad the Prophet are two separate people. It's like, oh my God. And like everyone in the class is like, what? Like, what is this? And again, if a male student or like a tall, self-confident black male student, I was a tall, self-confident white student, but had done this, you can imagine, like the teacher might lay into you. Teacher, what, are you retarded? What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you completely screwed? No. And the whole response from the teacher was like, well, it's confusing when two different people in history have the same name. Like,
Okay.
100% pandering, encouraging, good for you. Like, you tried your best.
Yeah.
You get an A-. Like,
okay.
So I know these are extreme, but what I'm saying is, like, in a much more subtle way, I see that going on all the time.
Okay.
At all levels, including often enough in the workplace, compared to what kind of workplace.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of good examples from my experience in high school, but I can't come up with something as blatant as that, because those are pretty striking examples where there were lower expectations for women, lower expectations for people who are non-white.
Right.
Yeah, and I agree with you. That is a problem. Like we should have the same standards for the assignments that are given to different, whatever gender and whatever race. So
right. So look, women's sport is less competitive than men's sport. Women's prison is less scary than men's prison. Women in the military are treated different from, like, it's everything. Like that's what's scary. And like, by the way, I think the exceptions prove the rule. I think the reason why there's so much whining about how hard it is to be in the fashion industry, whether you're a fashion model or a designer, is that's like the one industry where it's only women and gay men. Like 99% of people are either women or gay men, and where people are really brutal with each other, the same way straight men are brutal with other straight men. Where it's like, oh no, like this purse isn't good enough. Like, if you want this to be in the show, you know what I mean? Where it's on that level. Yeah.
All right. So before we started recording this, you gave a notice for about an hour.
Yeah.
And I was just, doing.
Oh, take it whatever direction you want to take.
Yeah.
it.
No,
I'm just setting the stage.
Yeah. So I was getting some things done in the kitchen and beforehand, and I just thought of something I would like to say.
You see how badly made this cup is? This is the bigotry of low expectation. Look at how badly. Come on, seriously.
I don't know who designed that, but anyway.
I'll bet you money it was a woman.
Oh. So I have a lot of things that Why? Okay, I have a lot of things that I would like to talk about, but just because you talked about breaking down crying, this issue, this is something that you mentioned in your video about men, advice for young men too. And I think it's just worth telling because I myself was a young woman once. I myself was 18 years old. I myself was 19 years old. And I will never get another chance to be 18 years old or 19
We're
years
kind
old.
of celebrating Melissa becoming middle-aged. I know you guys think she's a teenager, but she's not. Anyway, go on.
I don't think anybody thinks I'm a teenager. Anyway, yeah, so I think it's worth telling this story, even though it might be slightly embarrassing for me to recount. And I hadn't thought about this at all beforehand. So I was just Good. Contrasting it. So like I have some things written down, but just you bring up the breaking down crying. So I had a job when I was in university. It was, I think I was 20 years old when I had this job. And my boss was she was overweight. And she was a Black woman. She had a lot of charisma. She was just an interesting person to spend time around. Like, she was she was a character, and she didn't really live by the same standard, these low expectations for women.
Yeah,
I noticed that. So one example that happened is I wasn't aware of my doing this, but she noticed that I wasn't coming into work. Like I would come into work at the last second. Like I would walk in right when it was about to be 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And her view on it was that I should be coming into the office like 10 minutes early. I should be like getting prepared and be ready for the day at like 8 a.m.
Right.
And one day I came into work and she took me aside and she just, in a calm way said, come into my office. I want to talk to you. So this was a workplace situation where I was being called out for something that I had done wrong. And I could just feel like my heart rate going up. And I've always had this issue with authority figures and somebody like trying to correct my behavior and stuff.
Yeah.
And I do think this is something that is particularly difficult for women to deal with, maybe because they don't have as much experience with it, because of this different standards, these different low expectations. So yeah, she just, she didn't say it in a rude way or anything, but she was explaining to me like, you need to come into work earlier. I've noticed this. Have you noticed that every day this week you've come in like right before 8 a.m. rather than coming in like 10 minutes before? And I started crying. Like it was just something that I couldn't help. Like I really didn't want to.
And it was just the two of you alone in her office.
Yeah, it was just me and her alone in her office. And yeah, so I regret that that's how I handle it at that stage.
Sure.
20 years old, you're not a kid. But still, that was my level of maturity at that stage, my ability to handle interpersonal conflicts, workplace conflicts. So yeah, I would say that was a big issue for me. I'm not saying all women, but I do think it's something that is something that we need to learn from.
I remember an anecdote like that from a guy. It's not worth telling the whole story, but you guys know I've read a bit about the history of the CIA. He was a guy who worked more with the FBI than the CIA, but he did both. And he complained that when they let women into the FBI, and again, I think women in some sense have always been involved in the CIA, but they started having women in higher positions.
Yeah.
That he said there was this huge change where people would break down crying in meetings. People would scream in meetings, where he said, like, he was an old enough guy. He remembered when it was, he remembered when it was all men and when it was all white men. Because, there was a time when there were no black people. Like it was an openly racist, society. And, look, it's just interesting. I mean, I think obviously, I'm not saying I think we should have an all male workplace. I don't believe that. But I remember him saying, you can imagine in that kind of job, whether it's the FBI or the CIA, there were probably a lot of meetings where there's somebody got shot in the head because of you or something, like something really bad happened. You made the wrong decision and now Fred is dead. You know what I mean? Whatever. People really break down. Women. So that's the end of the point was women were breaking down weeping in a way that guys weren't before.
Okay, that's
and how the whole office changed. Yeah. So I mean, it depends what kind of line of work you're in.
Right.
But,
yeah, but I just think too, like looking back at that situation, at that story, where it's not even when I didn't have the threat of being fired or something. It was just the confrontation that I was not able to deal with. Like that. If it had been a young man, a young white man, or a young man with a different race, like how would the expectations be different for them?
Right.
And that is something that I just didn't think about at that time. I was so like, when you're young, like you're so in your own mind, you're in your own, you're selfish, you're not thinking of how you're going to be perceived by other people. And,
so I just mentioned this. I have told Melissa this story before, but I think it's never been told on camera. So my ex-girlfriend from a million years ago, my blonde ex-girlfriend, she was going to university. Her major, I think, ended up just being English literature. Maybe, I think she did combined women's studies, English literature. But anyway, that kind of thing. And, she told me this anecdote because I was complaining about the way evaluation and grading is structured in universities, where there's just no, like if I pour out my heart and soul to research and write this paper and then it just disappears into the system and you get a number by email, you find out what grade you got. There's no meaningful learning from, whatever.
Yeah. And
she gave me an example where she was in one of these big lecture theater classes. There are like 400 students in the class. At University of Toronto, we had huge classes. There's one professor and hundreds of students in a big lecture theater. And she just decided, so in case you hadn't guessed, she is a good-looking blonde, and she's a cute blonde rather than like a threatening blonde, But she was that age. She was a very attractive young woman, and nobody said shit to her, and nobody said higher standards, really, And she decided to completely disregard the stated requirements for like the final essay for this course, the essay that's worth like 50% of your grade, which is also normal at University of Toronto. And instead of, everyone's typing on a computer and printing out an essay for so many pages, instead she bought one big piece of like art paper. So I don't know, some kind of fancy, colored paper. And she got out her calligraphy pens and she used like colored pens and did like decoration stuff on the border. And she wrote this like thought poem or some shit. Yeah, like, she did this like artistic response to like the book that they were assigned to read with like, with like pretty pictures and like 4 different colors of pens used and shit. Like she describes me. So she's telling me this anecdote. And again, look, she's telling it under the heading of my saying how the evaluation system is fucked up with universities. And she's like, and she just heard nothing back. She was like, when she handed it to like the TA to hand it, there was like, they made a funny expression. And then she got whatever, she got an A- or something. She gets a grade back, right? Completely disregarding these things. And what I said to her, without missing a beat, I didn't think about it. I didn't like come back to her a week later. At the moment, I'm sitting there listening to her tell this story where she describes this fucking arts and crafts thing she did for like a 400 level English lit class at a university level. And I said to her, how do you think your professor would have spoken to you if you were a 6 foot tall black male? She was devastated by this. She had never thought about it. And it's way beyond white privilege, and it's way beyond female privilege or pretty girl privilege. It's like your instructor in this course so totally fucking trivializes you as a human being. They hold you to such low standards that no one is taking you aside and saying, look, if you can't perform at this level, like if you can't write an essay that meets these standards, that meets these specifications, but then like, dude, you can't do this job. Like, I mean, it's the same. What if you're talking about training someone to be a nurse, training someone to be a doctor, talking about Izzy Davis getting a degree in nutrition and chemistry and biology? Like someone isn't taking you aside and saying, look, like, I don't care how many pretty colored pens you used or how creative you were or something like, I'm not here to gas you up, kid. You fucked up. Like you're falling way short of the minimum standards. You're not showing confidence. Yeah. Because look, I'm sorry, but if you were a tall, scary looking black dude, and again, people, I mean, then and now, people responded to me primarily as a tall, scary looking dude. People were scared of me in Toronto. Not that I'm that scary. It's that they're that sheltered. Seriously, people were afraid of me growing up in Toronto, which is fucked up. But anyway, people found me really imposing and intimidating. But, if I'd done some shit like that, the professor is going to say, look, like, this is the kind of competence I'm supposed to be training you to have. Yeah. And if you're not developing that, or if you're not moving up, it's like, do you want me to fail you? Like, do you want to do the assignment again? Like, what do you want me to do? You've put me in a position as a professor. Like this, Huh. So yeah.
Okay.
I mean, these are the questions. Yeah. Right. Anyway, look, I do have other examples, but part of the significance of the standard I'm saying is my own girlfriend's response to it when I challenged her that way. That was not the only challenge. She had a lot of expectations about society and politics and shit. Like she expected to walk into a room and be treated like a princess everywhere she went. And especially at that age and looking the way she did. I'm sorry, she was a very attractive woman. That's why I put up with her. Sure, she was a terrible girlfriend, terrible relationship. I regret it. This is really the wrong. I really regret it. But anyway, she was a very good looking young woman. And it's like, look, what if you walk, like whether we're talking about like City Hall or talking to a stranger on the street or talking to a business, like what if you were a tall black male? Like, and you should hold yourself to that standard. Like you should be conducting yourself in a way where you would be respected if you were a tall black male. Like I'm earning my professor's respect, or I'm pushing respect at City Hall. I'm whatever it is I'm doing. I'm not leaning on this privilege. And she'd been totally unaware of it. She'd been really sleepwalking through life that way, not thinking about the extent to which that shaped.
Right. Okay. So I'm not trying to be nitpicky. Sure. Not trying to be nitpicky. I didn't know your ex-girlfriend, of course. I'm going based off of your stories about her. So, but
she does not have her own YouTube channel.
But yeah, I hazard. I want to. I'm not trying to like protect her or something, but like when you say that she was expecting everybody to treat her like a princess or something, right? Like I don't even think a lot of people have that level of awareness. Agreed. It's not that they have the expectation. Right. It's just that's what they've experienced in their life, and they haven't had someone saying, "No, you should have the same expectations. Yeah. You should have the same behavior."
Or no one even saying, "Step it up, try harder."
Yeah. Go on, right. So yes, I do think that this is an issue, and I don't know if this is something that is more of a problem for women or if it's more of a problem. Like, okay, what I want to say is this wanting to this ideal of perfection, right? I don't know if this is always the case with men and women, but I really do feel like men are more okay with there being like errors, with there being like straight up like like just making mistakes and learning from them. I feel like men are like, I don't know if it's their experience just from like having the process of older men.
But it's not biology.
No, I know, but like having older men like critique them. Older men saying like, no, you need to do better or something, like
saying you fucked up.
Women don't have that, and therefore like they don't get used to that process of making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and like and building up themselves that way.
40 people in the audience, guys. Take a second to hit thumbs up. More people will join the live stream while it's going if you hit thumbs up, and then afterwards, when this is a video, more people will see the video. So if you think this is a worthwhile discussion, take a second, hit thumbs up. If you change your mind later, you can undo the thumbs up and hit thumbs down. But
yeah, that'd be great. Because it's more interesting when you get more people in the audience and so on. So yeah. But yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, this is something that I've had to get used to, and actually be okay with making mistakes and accepting when I don't know certain things, or accepting that, like actually reflecting on what I've been doing. Like there have been times in our relationship when you've been like, you know, like you haven't been doing this or that, like what's going on? Like, you know, step it up. Like you are not realizing that this is happening.
You're not holding yourself to any kind of standard at all.
Yeah.
High or low. You're not really thinking about it, right?
Yeah. And
well, look,
I've broken down crying hundreds of times in this relationship because of that. Because of that exact situation where I'm just like, why are you calling me out on this? Like, why can't you just give me a break or something? But I know, like, that's
it's
how
not
it
just
is.
you broke down crying in response to problems with baking school.
Oh yeah.
You were baking. I'm saying, you know, you've had the stereotypical
Yep.
feminine trait of breaking down crying in response to, you know,
yes.
in response to different things. But look, I don't believe this is a biological difference between men and women. I think it's a issue of culture and experience and expectation stuff.
Okay.
And one of the most telling demonstrations of this is to look at how effeminate gay men are treated. So you can be in all kinds of situations, including like when I was involved in the theater. I've never been involved in the fashion industry, but I think within university classrooms, if there is a guy, but he really actively cultivates that persona, he's a gay man and he talks in an effeminate way, because some gay men are butch, you know, some don't have that persona, but effeminate gay men, there's a similar thing that goes on where nobody's holding them to the standard, nobody's taking them seriously. And that can include even when they're doing things that are really wrong or abusive or something, they're crossing a line. It's like, oh, nobody takes it seriously. Why? Because he's an effeminate man and you're not holding him to account the way you would a straight man. And maybe just fundamentally, you don't perceive him as a threat the way you would a straight man. You don't perceive what he's doing as consequential the same way. So I'm just saying a lot of the same trivialization, and I feel denigration and holding people to low standards, that happens with effeminate, with, effeminate gay men also. I think you can see that in the workplace. I think you can see that in university. So on and so forth.
Yeah.
And again, breaking down weeping and everything else. So I think that gives you an interesting point of comparison to sometimes ask, how would this be different for an effeminate gay man? And often it's shockingly the same, with the kind of low expectations.
Okay, I'm gonna try to switch topics here.
Okay.
Although I
so a little interesting comment from the audience.
Yeah.
Junebug says, that sounds horrific. I'm Black and was always told to work harder than my peers because people in England wouldn't take me seriously or something. My teachers were lovely though. So look, I think, for women generally, those days are gone. Really, Margaret Thatcher's generation was the generation where women were told, if you want to be taken seriously, you have to be harder than a man. You have to be harder working, but I do also just mean harder. You have to be tougher than a man. You have to really earn it. You have to earn it more than any man. There was a certain generation that went through that. And, I think we have to be honest too about the fact that the vast majority of women, they can't really be encouraged to work hard, whether academically or intellectual otherwise, with the expectation that there is any good employment or reward coming for that effort. Like most of these things, if you do it, you have to be motivated just by wanting to cultivate your own mind or cultivate your own character or something. The vast majority of both men and women are not going to do a job any better than being a waitress, waiter or waitress or what have you. The vast majority of us go on to jobs. To use Jordan Peterson's idiom, we go on to do jobs, not careers, But, do you want to be a waitress who's just a waitress, or do you want to be a waitress who's, really taken seriously as an intellectual in some field, who's really, really developed herself, this or that way. Now, there are a lot of guys who take that seriously. I mean, I know it's like the butter jokes, whether it's in an army unit or working on an oil rig, there's some guy who's got his books with him and stuff. There's some guy who's saying he wants to be a screenwriter in Hollywood, or he has some dream, or he's reading philosophy, he's reading Friedrich Nietzsche or Schopenhauer or something. Like you meet guys who have intellectual pretensions and aspirations and ambitions above and beyond the jobs they've got. But anyway, so this is just a response to this comment. Yeah. Women who take the attitude that they have to work harder because they're women, or specifically they're Black women. Like you won't be taken seriously unless you work 10 times harder. I've got it. So I feel that's really the Margaret Thatcher generation. And that was a time when most women who went into education, they only had like 2 paths open to them. It's like, oh, do you want to become a school teacher? Do you want to become a nurse? Yeah. And there were no other career paths open to them. For my generation, women were told all career paths are open to you. Everything's open to you. Yes. And everything is easy. And you're equal without having to earn it. You know what I mean? You're equal. I'm saying
yes. We are a slightly different generation, but from my experience,
we have a 14-year age gap.
So when I was in school, definitely it was any career path would be open to women. It doesn't matter, and there was a lot of encouragement for women to be independent, and within my own family, like that I should focus on my career, that I should figure out a way for myself to be financially independent. So I don't know, from my experience, I admit, like I might have some bias in this way, given my my background, my race, my gender and stuff, that like I didn't feel that because I was a woman that I wouldn't be taken seriously. Right. I felt like it was the same. Like if I was to become an engineer, I would be on the same playing
But you
field.
See, there's a way to take positive motivation out of that, which is like, okay, I've got to try harder, I've got to work harder. Yeah. And I do think my generation was already after that was over. Okay. When I don't think anyone was trying. I grew up. It's the Kurt Cobain generation. It's the Nirvana generation.
Oh, I have something really.
But I just think generally the whole culture was into nobody working hard, nobody having any aspirations, nobody giving 110%. You know what I mean? So but including women. So that influenced men too. But But the era of try harder and prove your worth, that was out of style.
Okay, I have a great thing that just came to mind. So I was thinking of changing the topic, but speaking of Margaret Thatcher, this is just in relation to this topic of female politicians, of being taken seriously. Just the other day, we were watching the news. Do you remember this? There was a news story from a well-known politician who was running for president at one point. Do you remember her? She has been involved with conflicts because of her nationality, her race. So Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. She.
I thought you were going to talk about Kamala Harris.
No, okay, Elizabeth Warren was being interviewed, and she was being interviewed about her newest children's story that she had put up.
The bigotry of low expectations. Yes, so
you're right. I think is a real example.
The expectations applied to Elizabeth Warren. That is a great example. That as opposed to how tough they would be interviewing a man or interviewing a Black man or something who had a similar record. Whoa, you're right. Anyway, go
just
on.
The kind of conversation that she was having about her book.
It was all good for you.
Yes. Yes. Just that would not be the kind of. I want to find specific examples, but just talking about like how much she loved meeting people's dogs when she was on the campaign trail, and like this kind of.
Yes.
Really lowbrow. Like, what is this conversation about?
There's a sort of mutual trivialization going on. Like for the interviewer, like I'm trivializing you, you're trivializing me, we're trivializing this political context.
Yeah.
And like there's no sense of like, dude, you just lived through 20 years of failure in Afghanistan. It's on you. What the fuck?
Right.
Dude, you just lived through 20 years of us not solving the problem with global warming. And it's not, you're like, no, let alone, dude, you lied about your ethnicity and portrayed yourself as indigenous American for decades. And like, you know,
which is really messed up.
no sense of confrontation or keeping it, none. Yeah.
Right?
This is, you know, anyway, you made up complete bullshit against Bernie Sanders. You know, that was really where she derailed her campaign. You know, you went up, you know.
Yeah.
Nope. So yeah.
I do think it really is the case now that women can get in politics and they can be taken seriously if they behave in a serious way and they actually try to make changes in the world. And I'm glad that I'm living, like, of all the times to be born in the history of human civilization, like now is the best time in terms of women actually being able to have representation in government and run for office. You know, it's a wonderful thing. And I do despise that. I do despise that, like, female politicians, like, okay, it is true that the president can be filmed reading a children's story to an audience of school children or something. But like, the conversation is never about, it's never this Anyway, so this is kind of leading to a topic that I wanted to talk about.
Let's be clear. So in English, we say talking down to someone, but it's not really talking down to women. It's assuming that you don't have to challenge them. Like, you don't have to raise a standard, that there's nothing for them to live up to. You know, it's different. The low expectations thing is different from talking down to someone. Yeah, that's all I'd say. But that's profound, and it goes on for women. It starts in childhood.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, oh, good for you. And they are just not being talked to. Now, look, you know, just keeping it real. You know, so look, I've known different girls who've been through this from different perspectives. But, you know, I've known girls who were, okay, let's start with the male example and I'll say the female example. There are boys who say they want to be a basketball player, and people say to them straight up, you are never going to be a basketball player. You're 5'2". You know, and whatever, if they say they want to play football, right away they're told, well, you're not big enough to be a linebacker, but you can be a tight end or something. Like, you know, they're told what position they can play. They want to play baseball. It's like, well, look, you don't have what it takes to play this position, but you can be shortstop. Like, you know, just their physical characteristics, you know, whether or not they're big enough, tall enough, strong enough, and then getting into their reflexes, what they can and can't do. And what I see across the board with women, are there exceptions? Hey, there are 4 billion exceptions in this world. You know, sure, there are exceptions. But, you know, what I see with women is women being told again and again, you can do anything you want to do. You're wonderful. Even to the point of absurdity of telling women they can do sports they can't do. That telling women that they can be a supermodel when they're just not tall enough. They can't be a runway model. They're not the right size and shape. You know what I mean? Really, like, you see that with the beauty discourse.
Yes, but that is one other topic that I thought of talking about. Just this reality that men get comfortable with at a young, or maybe they still have issues with it, but like, men have to get comfortable at a young age with being shorter than other men.
Yes,
with having a build that will never look like other men. Like,
but look, sorry, but I just want, because I was setting up just a transition to the intellectual side of it.
Yeah.
I remember reading a fucking master's degree thesis, and if it wasn't a master's degree thesis, it was a PhD thesis written by a woman, a female student at University of Toronto, and I was just saying to my colleague, like, if you or I had written this, like, don't you think we would have been laughed out of the room? And like, quite possibly we would have been given directions to rewrite it, to start again, because like, normally you don't just fail with graduate study with MA or PhD. Don't you think we'd be given this back and say, look, you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to rewrite. Where like, you know, but my point is, I think this does carry on. That's what I've seen, including at Cambridge and Oxford, including at elite universities. University of Toronto is supposed to be elite, where people are just this good for you, you tried your best attitude, and not saying like, no, like, either you understood what this said in Sanskrit or you didn't. Either you did the work or you didn't. Either this is at a standard of excellence where it's real scholarship or it's not, you know. And again, obviously that applies to women in politics, like your example, Elizabeth Warren, and so on and so forth. You know, is anyone holding Elizabeth Warren to the same standards they would hold Bernie Sanders too, frankly, you know, and anyone else on the docket. Sorry, take it wherever you want to. But yeah, I'm just saying the physical thing matters.
The physical thing,
but I am just talking about it as prefiguring and being an easier to see example of what goes on intellectually.
Yes. So okay, maybe the physical thing is a topic that we can get to later on, but it is something that I was thinking.
Do it now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just what I was saying earlier is that I do feel like at a younger age. Maybe it's because of this team sports thing that men get comfortable with the fact that, oh, well, maybe I will never succeed in basketball because I'm just not tall enough, to actually compete on the basketball court. You have to be a certain height. Whereas women are, I think, deeply uncomfortable with their bodies. And we hear this all the time in the mainstream media because of these differences in build and the differences in where, just things like where things deposit in your body, like just the shape of your body and things. Like, yes, I do think that this is a difference between men and women and what they have to accept about themselves.
Okay,
Yeah.
So look, there's something here that overlaps with what you're saying.
Okay.
So Junebug says, yeah, men will say anything to sleep with a woman. Look, so women do live with flattery, they do live with seduction, but I think you're missing the point, Junebug, because there's a question about what men will say just to avoid dealing with bullshit from women. What women will say just to avoid dealing with bullshit from women in the workplace, in the school. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so coming back to even the examples we already used before. So I have this school teacher, and there's this very beautiful, very stupid girl who's just done this presentation where she is unaware that Muhammad Ali, the boxer in the 20th century, is not the same person as Muhammad the Prophet 1,000 years ago. Like, what do you want to do? Do you want this girl? Like, I think on some levels, this is a woman, it's a female teacher. It's a female teacher for that class. Like, a part of what she's doing is just, I don't want this girl to break down crying. I just don't want to deal with it. Like, I just don't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? So again, you like the team sport situation.
Yeah.
Like dudes may be fucked up by it too.
Absolutely,
like being told, look, you're never going to be a heavyweight. Look at the size of your fist.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do boxing, you're going to be a featherweight. Like, you're just never going to be big enough. Sorry, people use fist measurements for that as a yardstick. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, you tell a guy, look, you can never, your hand isn't big enough to ever be in the NBA. Remember that as kids, you don't have what it takes to do this sport or whatever, and we do say to men, you don't have what it takes intellectually to do this, which can be terrible. It can be a horrible thing to say to somebody.
Yeah. But
there's a lot of kind of man up stuff that goes on with that. Like, look, bro, and there's a lot of saying to the boy too, hey, prove me wrong. Oh, you think you can do it? Okay, go fucking show me. Why don't you show me you can take a baseball and throw it 99 miles an hour? Or why don't you show me you can take this book and teach yourself Sanskrit? Like, okay, you want to prove me wrong? Because I'm saying you can't do it. Show me. Like, there's more of that combative, challenging thing.
Yeah.
My point is, I don't think this is flattering women because people want to seduce them or sleep with them. It's different from flattery. It's just people who are like, I'm going to conserve my energy. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want this girl to break down crying, and that kind of vibe. Yeah, I think that's a lot.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of what's going on in the service. Go on.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I did think of saying something just in relation to what you were talking about there. I do feel like men at least have more of this influence of locker room, like that a coach will push them to do push-ups. That women don't really have that same. It is statistically the case that women after a certain age will stop team sports in high school. So whereas it generally the boys will continue doing sports in high school, the number of girls who continue doing sports in high school, it decreases. And so I think girls don't have as much exposure to this kind of locker room discussion of prepping before a game or something,
Right.
I'm not saying that that's like the most that's the best for building up your confidence, or that's the best for building up your ability to push yourself and fail and try again and stuff. But there at least is that kind of element to the experience of being a boy in America.
And taking responsibility for your own shit. I mean, outside of sports, whether that's taking responsibility for planning a trip or taking responsibility for violence in the streets.
Yeah.
Or what have you. So I'm sorry, probably 5 years ago or something, I told this anecdote. But once I was in Thailand with my girlfriend. This is a white Canadian girlfriend. This is not an Asian woman or something. And there was this particular alleyway in Bangkok, Thailand at that time. Now, I just mentioned how dangerous Bangkok changes from one period of time to the next. But this particular alley, in the middle of it, there was a restaurant. And they literally had at all times like two guys with machine guns in the front entrance. Well, it's like the back entrance to this restaurant, the alleyway entrance to this restaurant at all times, you know. So this is a dark, dangerous looking alleyway. And I just noted, I remember I said to my girlfriend in this context, she was like, "Oh no, we can go up this alleyway and get a thing. It's pitch black. It's night." And I remember saying to her, "Do you think that these guys have machine guns for no reason? Like the guys at that restaurant back there? Like, do you think this is not a dangerous alleyway in Bangkok?" Like, and I said to her, "If we get mugged, if we get jumped now, who's going to have to deal with it? I'm going to have to deal with it. I'm going to be the one fighting, not you." You know, with this particular girl. It's not true of all girlfriends. Maybe some of you guys are watching this and you have a girlfriend who's actually going to throw down, who's actually going to throw fists in that alleyway situation. It's like, look, I'm going to have to deal with it. All right. And then the reality is, I'm going to have to console you and make you feel better afterwards. Right. Like, even though I'm going to be physically beaten to shit and we will have both lost our wallets or whatever, I'm going to have to make you feel better, even though it's going to be your fault. Like, why are you making me go, really? And all this shit. It's just like she's never oh no, I'm fine. Like, you know, and by the way, I've been through situations with her where I had to stand up for her physically, where I had to, you know, none of them actually got to fists, but where I had to go after somebody at night in an alley where, you know, there was a physical threat of violence or whatever. And as a man, it's something normal. It's something you have to be prepared for. And I was thinking of this because, you know, I'm not involved with team sports. I never have been involved with team sports. I've said this all the time. Why do I do 200 push-ups a day on my knuckles? It's so I can get thrown down a staircase. You know what I mean? It's so I can deal with the constant threat of physical violence that you deal with as a man, including even walking on the streets here. You know, you do. Vancouver is worse. I mean, I felt it more in Vancouver. Whatever, you know, different situations are worse. But there are just so many drug addicts on the street here and shit. And that's it. I'm not training for any sport. But, you know, I'm pointing out, and again, that particular girlfriend, maybe she was a particularly bad example, but I think she's a pretty normal example. It's like, well, she's living her life like there were no consequences for this shit. And men are living their lives in a way like, look, bro, it's on you. Like, all of this is on you. Yeah. And by the way, I think that does come down to, because I really try to involve my girlfriends and wives, like when I'm married, in making the decisions and make the preparations stuff. But that can involve also like, hey, who's buying the airplane tickets? Who's booking? Like, and if you make the wrong choice, you know, so many women, they go through their whole fucking life and they think their only role is to whine. Like, oh, I don't like the hotel or whatever. Like, you, no, seriously. Seriously. And it's like, no.
I'm laughing because I know women from my past. You know,
I can remember a time early in this relationship. Yeah. And it's like, and you got to say to the woman, wait, but you got to say to the woman, look, if you don't like it, you could have booked the hotel. You could have done everything. You could have chosen the hotel. You know, like you could be taking a command role.
I was laughing because that was the influence that I had from my own mother, my own every woman that I knew. Yes, that was the situation.
Where it's just assumed the man does the planning role and the command role and the lead role, and then the woman's role is to whine and complain about it.
Yeah,
it's like no, dude. Like you.
Well, and it sucks too. Like no, like
you can be in charge. You can be in charge, and I want you to be in charge. Like 50% of the time. I'd love that. I'd love it if it's 60% of the time. Solve all my problems. You book the hotel. You book the airplane tickets. You get it organized. You make it happen. And you know, you take responsibility for the consequences when things go wrong.
Right. Yeah. No. It's way better when you do have involvement with that. When it is partly, I mean, yes, the responsibility is there, but like when you are actually involved with planning for a trip, then like you know from the other side, like, oh, right, this is how I was acting when like I was being entertained or like I was being taken somewhere. I totally took it for granted and stuff. So yeah, I do think that's a legit problem to talk about. So one thing that I wanted to say,
but I would just say, I think just to close it up, I think you can see, given all those reflections, I think really, you know, team sports and athletics, they fit into they're a little subcategory within a much broader problem.
Yeah.
With the corrosive influence of gender roles. That just say, I don't think team sports are like the primary paradigm that creates these other phenomena. I think we've talked about a much broader phenomenon here, and then team sports are just one example.
Right. So, okay, one thing that I wanted to discuss that's branching off of the Elizabeth Warren interview, that I do think that this is a time when women can become just as politically active as men and should be. I mean, it's our responsibility, and it's half of the population that can make a huge difference. So one thing that I wanted to talk about in this is I remember in family conversations, like at family gatherings, typically when I was younger, it was the old men that were talking about politics, that were talking about world events, that were talking about downtown Detroit, like the issues and the collapse of the car industry, the automobile industry in Detroit. And I remember when I was younger,
And women would take you aside and say, let's have girl talk.
oh my gosh, how did you know? Have I talked to you about this? I don't know.
I remember
Okay.
that happened once in front of me. We were with a Muslim family we were talking to. You remember that Muslim woman? All the
Yes.
guys were talking about politics. She was just looking at your face. You were really into it.
Yeah, I wanted
She
to-
likes, that's why she likes being with me. She likes talking about politics and history and this kind of stuff, really real stuff. And this woman, she's a Muslim woman wearing the headscarf. Takes like, oh, let's have girls. Oh, I hate it when they talk about, I hate it when the boys are talking about serious boy things. Let's do, whoa.
Okay, you remember that.
Yeah.
I
That was an example. And I think we talked about that time. You were like, I hate that. That's what happened within my own family was people,
Yeah, so I wanted to understand what they were talking about because to me it was like getting at all these really important issues.
Wouldn't it sound different? Like, hey, you and I are retarded. Let's have retard talk. Let's just,
Aw.
let me just take you. Let's have some. Let's
Look,
have some
okay.
retarded time. Like,
Okay.
let's just lower our intellectual standards and expectations.
All right, that is really how I feel about it. I agree with you.
Keeping
are-
it all the way real.
There are things that women have to deal with that men don't, and I do appreciate. I would appreciate having a woman to talk about like certain things like menstrual cycles and all this.
Sure.
That I didn't have that influence when I was a kid. Like no woman talked to me about understanding my menstrual cycle, understanding
Right.
fertility and pregnancy and all this stuff. Like I just didn't get that input. So yes, that's the kind of like woman talk or girl talk that I would actually like be interested in talking about other women with. But the general pattern of that was okay. So the men are talking about race. They're talking about black people in Detroit and this issue between
Right.
white people and black people. Like what are the origins of this? Like historically, what's the present situation and what are we going to do about it in the future? Like how can we solve this issue? Like yes, that mattered to me a great deal when I was growing up. I wanted to know why, and I wanted to understand like when we turned on the TV news, why is it that
The
we hear
racism of your time.
about so much? Yeah, I
Right.
know that was a huge part of growing up in Detroit.
You
in the
grew up.
Detroit-
You
in
grew up
the
in the
suburbs of
Obama
Detroit.
time too, right? I mean, that
Yes.
was interesting.
Yes, right. Oh yeah. I got to
Yeah.
hear my racist grandfather talking about the Black House. Yeah, that's what he said. Because no longer the White House. Yeah. So that legit, that really mattered to me, and I was quite angry about it. I was quite passionate about this because my education in school was anti-racist and was in favor of equality for everybody, and I got to see like just the
Right.
older generation had this
But your
problem.
point is here: women were not dealing with it. Women were not
Yeah.
even present in the discussion.
Or if
Women were
they-
trivializing
or if they
themselves.
were okay. So if they were, the contribution was just like so paltry compared to the
Yep.
contribution that men were making to the conversation.
Yeah.
And this really mattered to me, and I felt like I just wasn't getting the right inputs with like seeing women who were able to talk about these issues and who had even read a book about this issue. Like,
Yep.
the men in my family didn't read books at all. Like they didn't talk about. They didn't read about these things. They didn't study them. They just were talking out of their ass, basically. But at least they were talking about
They
it.
listened to talk radio. I think
Yes.
I think while driving their trucks, they were listening to
That is
political radio.
absolutely true.
But go on, yeah.
So yes, that was my experience when I was growing up, and I really wanted to understand, but at a certain stage, I just thought like, well, it's not about not taking it seriously. It's just that I don't know what to say, and I can't speak for myself, and
Yep.
this kind of helplessness. And if I do speak, I sound ignorant, I sound stupid.
Yep.
And I'm not.
Which is
Yeah.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be clear. Like, in case you guys think I was born wise, I wasn't. Like you're wrong and you're wrong and you're wrong, and then you look back and learn from your mistakes, and then you start being right. Like I'm just saying, for me as a teenager or in my 20s,
Yeah.
I was wrong about a lot of things. I said a lot of things that today I would, regret, or today I would disagree with or something. That is also part of growing up. Is that So
That's
I'll just
right,
say
yeah.
like. It's not, the path men take, and men do, snub each other and denigrate each other and prove each other wrong.
Yes.
And, again, you don't learn by making mistakes. You learn by having your mistakes pointed out to you.
Oh yeah,
So-
I heard men yelling at each other frequently
yeah,
about
sure,
like
yeah.
you know when they were talking
Yeah.
about these issues, and afterwards they would always it's not like they were angry at each other afterwards. Like, and I remember a couple of times my father would talk to me afterwards and just say like it's all in good fun or something like that. Like
Yes.
we're all just talking, but like no, I didn't get that
Right.
from women's discussions. Women's discussions like focused around like, okay, so what's little Johnny doing? Like, let's talk about his football
there
team.
was
this kind of thing.
one big family dinner I went to with you and your extended family, and it played out exactly that way. I was part of this big, rambunctious, confrontational political discussion that covered several topics.
Yeah.
And I would not say I was the center of attention, but I was one of the most, charismatic voices. There were maybe
absolutely.
three or four guys all kind of contending with each other, and everyone else, the women were watching silently. No woman spoke during that conversation. And then when women did speak, because I did stand around with the women when they were talking in much more solemn voices, they were talking. There was a girl who had a new boyfriend, and the boyfriend already had a kid from a former marriage.
Yeah.
So, but
you remember?
but yeah, curse with the regular.
Yeah.
But the point is, to be blunt, women were talking about dick.
Yeah, to be blunt, I guess that's true.
In a word, they were
about
talking about their own sex lives and the sex lives of the younger women who were there. And so
Yeah.
that was what we were talking about. And then to some extent,
who's getting married,
Yeah.
who's having a baby.
to some extent, trivial things like new cars or things too.
Yeah.
But it was
somebody
really
getting
on
a
a
new
different
job
level.
or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
And the men's conversation, which again entertained people to some extent, was really
Right.
So look, I think that we've done a good job here of adumbrating the culture on the whole.
Yeah.
The other big thing that's changed is now women play video games just like men do.
Okay. Yeah.
Women play video games. Women become psychiatric drug addicts. Women are dealing with
That's
all these
true.
other distractions and
It's
addictions.
equality
And-
in all these other ways today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
we have
no.
equal access to PlayStation.
No,
We have
but for women, it's even worse because there are lower standards applied to them. I think if women get into PlayStation, it doesn't matter what video games, whatever kind of video games, nobody's going to say to them, bruh, man up. Like, bro, you got, you know what I mean? Like with men, and there might not be that many people, but no, I mean, I think it's this whole bigotry of low expectations thing, right? Like, oh, good for you. Oh, you're taking some time. Oh, good. You do live streaming video games. Oh, like the expectation is the expectation is there is nothing more serious you could be doing or should be doing, with your time. And with men, yeah, people do. I read the biography of a guy who committed suicide. That's why they wrote his biography. I read the biography of this guy who killed himself. And he went from being addicted to those video games like Call of Duty to actually joining the army. And that was part of his process. People saying to him, look, you're wasting your life playing this video game. If this is what you like, why don't you actually get out and start doing some arms training and stuff?
Yeah.
And he did. And then he committed suicide. This is a long story short. Yeah, that's why the article was written. But I'm just saying there are people who will say to a man, look, you ought to take yourself more seriously. You ought to take life more seriously. Actions have consequences. And so I'm saying, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Women have all the same temptations and distractions. But then there are the lower expectations.
I think that is true. Look, I don't know how much it's different from the different genders though with this situation because of course you're more likely to have friends if you are a young man who plays video games because many other young men play video games and they want friends who also play video games.
But women, it's even more because they have men trying to sleep with them.
Yeah.
Like through the no. Everybody wants to be their friend. They're a female voice on the voice chat. No. And there are men sending them money and trying to buy their underwear and all this. No. Anyway, go on. But no, I think you're wrong there. The amount of attention female gamers get.
Okay, yeah, I guess. Thinking about actually live streaming.
So I was going to say here too, Frida says she doesn't know many women who play video games. This includes iPhone, iPad, like it's not just console gaming. And
The Sims.
Right?
That's
right?
so funny. I played The Sims for so many hours as a child. It is so embarrassing. Anyway.
Yeah, that's one of the ones we never talk about. Never comes up.
Yeah.
Your Sims.
And Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Roller Coaster Tycoon.
For hours and hours.
Right?
As a 10-year-old girl.
But my point is, this goes beyond console gaming into all kinds of other gaming. Thumbs up if you've been a former addict of The Sims. Give the video a thumbs up, guys. More people will join the conversation. More people will see it once it's a video. Just helps us reach an audience who might be interested in some of this stuff. But anyway, there are real statistics on this, guys. It's true that women do not play the same video games as men, to generalize when you're looking at the population of millions of people around the world. But yeah, games like Animal Crossing, they have a pretty precise statistical knowledge of for how many hours women are logged in, for how many hours they're playing the game. For games like Candy Crush on mobile phones, for like so many different games, there are games that women actually prefer, that they play more, that they play for more hours than men.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I recall, even the gambling games, even, card games like poker and so on. You know, that's that stuff they do. There is actually a mass audience.
Okay, yeah, I believe you on that. Yeah, so I am glad that when I was in college, I think there was the beginnings of this streaming culture of women playing video games. However, I didn't play games like that, so I wasn't exposed to that. I did play video games in college, and I deeply regret it. And if I could say, you know, relating to the title of this video, quitting video games and being an intellectual as a woman, like, yeah, I do regret that. I will never get a chance to be 19 years old again. And at this great university where
Right.
I think it's one of the best universities that I could have attended at that age and at that stage of my life. Like, I had the opportunity to do independent research on my own, actually get serious about my life and take myself seriously, and I didn't.
And you could have learned Latin, and you could have learned Greek, and you could have learned economics, and you could have learned and you learned nothing. You learned how to play The Sims.
What I would want to say to
and Mario Galaxy. She played Mario Galaxy 100% during university. Just mentioned, go on. And Mario Galaxy 2. Go on.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, what I would want to say to young women is, like, there will be people who will try to write you off or just say, like, stop taking yourself so seriously. Like, let's just relax and have fun. Like, no, you should take yourself seriously. And if you aren't going to take yourself seriously now, why would it be easier when you're 25, when you're 30 years old, to then become a more intellectual person, to care more and to read more books? This doesn't get easier as you get older. Like, it's something that you should start building when you're that age rather than playing video games.
And let me just say again, you know, being an intellectual has nothing to do with how you earn your money. You can be a stripper and be an intellectual. You know, it's not easy, but, you know, you can be a waitress and be an intellectual. You can be an army officer and be an intellectual. Like, it really doesn't have to do with how you earn your money. And for the vast majority of people globally and within the United States of America, there is no way to earn your living using your brain. You know, just give me example. You could work at a garage repairing cars. You repair cars for a living, but you're also you know, just say that's also really underrated. And it's certainly for women, it's even more underrated. There's no sense, you know, there's no sense of be a man. There's no sense of man up. There's no sense of, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Oliver says people will lower their expectations for young men, though, for cooking extremely badly, for example. Gender roles are real. So this is something I was thinking about earlier this week, because you remember at one point in time, we were training to become bakers.
We were indeed.
Yeah. And you pointed out to me, you reminded me, which is, it's great to have somebody, it's great to be in a relationship with somebody who holds you accountable, like reminds you of things that you've done. Because it's easy to just let yourself off the hook, and having somebody who holds you to higher standards. He reminded me that at that time, just the difficulty of being encouraging to me to read, to build myself up intellectually. And what I was doing at the time was frittering my time away, baking bread, making homemade soy milk, like trying to be a zero waste homemaker type of person. And I do think that a lot of the exposure to older women on the internet at the time was influencing me, that like there are these kind of paradigms or paragons of femininity that I see online, like women who have children, who manage to cook whole food, plant-based diet for all their children. They manage to grow their own food and live this kind of lifestyle, this zero waste lifestyle, this vacationing in Hawaii lifestyle. You know, that definitely had an influence on me. And I really thought that I was building myself into this person that, you know, a real woman, like being a real woman, you have to have all these things down where you're able to be responsible for taking care of children while maintaining a beautiful physique, while maintaining your kitchen and all these different things that, you know, at some points I have felt resentful about that like men don't have that same kind of expectation put on them, that same kind of expectation for their role. So yeah, I would be curious to hear like what you think about that. What you think about the kind of on social media, what women are exposed to for role models.
I'll be real with
for
you.
being
I
role
disagree. Well, okay, I think the point you're making is interesting. I disagree with Oliver's point entirely.
models. Okay.
In our culture, still to this day, when you say chef, they think man. Being serious about cuisine, and I'm sorry, I can even say this about you, and I can say this about other women who were involved in that college program. There was this attitude, including the guy who was the CEO of the college, the guy who was the head. It's like, okay, if you're a man, you're serious about being a chef. You're serious about being a baker.
That is true.
If you're a career baker, the gender role is that you're a man and you're quite a domineering, details-oriented man.
Mm-hmm.
You're a man who's, really, like being an architect or something. You're a man with a steel trap mind and you're expected to be a bit of an asshole. That's the role of being the chef. You're the head chef for this bakery. You're in charge. That's a male gender role, right? You're a baker. You're a pastry chef. Yeah, James is chiming in, right? Okay, wait, but like, look, and the point was the attitude, and I mean, I think even Melissa was kind of a victim of this to a minor extent. We just talked about it, just like coming to this, like as opposed to women, like, oh, you're just learning to bake for fun. You're just learning, like, this is part of the enjoyment of life. This is part of the relaxation. Like you even saw that.
That's really true.
Yes.
Our experience in cooking school was like, wait, we want to learn how to make on a massive scale. We want to learn how to
industrial scale, how to
bakery.
turn a profit, how to
And
how to
like,
do this on time, on a schedule.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, just this is this is your grandma with your grandkids going.
We don't want to make one pie. We don't want to make one tart. We want to make 100 vegan tarts. We want to make 100 vegan pies.
This is not about grandma doing something nice on the weekend or something. Yeah. So I'm sorry, but my point is to say in direct response to Oliver, no, even in cuisine, standards are lower for women. Even in cuisine, even in that professional setting of being a chef, being a baker. What I saw was instead the gender roles were like men are the guys who take it serious, and women can't even be expected to lift a 10-pound sack of flour.
And can't be expected to know the differences between the different kinds of wheats.
That's right. Yeah. Women can't be expected to have this steel trap mind approach. So even there, I saw it. So I'm sorry, the bigotry of low expectation thing, I just want to say, I've seen that everywhere, including cuisine, including baking, including cooking as a professional or getting involved with that at the college level. Okay. So that means that you made a different interesting point. Do you remember what it was?
So I was curious what you had to say about the kind of male, like the differences between female role models. Like, yes, there is this idea that like we should look up to Hillary Clinton as a female role model. But if you are thinking of just like social media, if you're thinking of YouTube, the kind of person that.
Okay, so look, I'm going to tell you what I'm saying. It's really brief, but it's really deep. Okay, the difference is today women have a nearly infinite variety of choices because of the internet, because of social media. And as a result, things have gotten worse. Now, what do I mean? So back in the 1950s and 1960s in Canada, there was like one female role model on CBC television. And she was, you can imagine, she was an intelligent, well put together woman who did the kind of news commentary show and did interviews.
Okay.
And I know it's sick to say, but of course it was an incredibly wholesome influence on the women of Canada. It was like, look, this is the kind of adult you can be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's it. You didn't have a choice. There were maybe 4 TV stations. And if you change to the BBC, if you watch British television, because in Canada at that time, there was a lot of, cultural connections to England. You had a similarly kind of phony presentation of a highly intellectual, professional woman on camera. And of course, it's fake. She's reading a script. And this isn't who she really is or something. You know what I mean? But you had a very small number of female role models that were chosen for you, in 1950s or 1960s that way. Now, today, instead, what you have is the relative infinity of YouTube, the relative infinity of Facebook, the internet generally.
Yes.
And people are allowed to seek out and select the role models they prefer. For example, on Instagram. And there you see instead this snowballing effect where women who are vain justify their vanity by picking role models who are vain. Mm-hmm. Women who want to be, for example, women who want to be a marijuana smoking hippie with dreadlocks who dabbles in Hindu mysticism. They're going to select women on YouTube, on Instagram, say, oh, I love her. They're picking role models. They're picking examples for emulation that are exaggerating their own fundamentally self-destructive, self-indulgent, and stupid tendencies.
Okay.
So that is what I see on a massive scale. Now it's very it's very difficult to challenge a woman by saying, hey, why don't you go on Instagram and you only select accounts of women who are the type of person you want to be, right? Even with books, you and I were joking. We had one book written by a female author. We have a huge bookshelf. I could wheel it over. You've seen it in the background recently. Yeah. Melissa made a video. We have a lot of books now. It's huge by my standards. Most of my life, I've been poor and moved from one apartment to the next. I never owned books. This is the most. These are the most books I've owned in one apartment at one time in my life. But we have a lot of books in this apartment now, by my standards, because I never had the luxury of living in one place and building a book collection. But we had like one book by a female author. And I joked with Melissa. I said, hey, what if we organize our library on 2 shelves? We have all the books by male authors on one shelf and all the books by female authors. Like, do we even have 2 books by a female? And the one book by a female author turned out to be terrible. That's a whole
other thing I could talk about.
No.
Wow.
But wait. Okay, keep it. Make a note of something. But look, I just want to finish this point. The point is, like, if as a woman you challenge yourself to look up to intellectual role models on Instagram, what have you got?
Right.
Nothing. And it's very hard to. I'm not saying there's nobody, but like, why don't you go follow Jacqueline Glenn? I mean, I remember what Jacqueline Glenn was 5 years ago, 8 years ago. There probably were some young women who thought, oh, Jacqueline Glenn, she's a strong, educated woman. She's studying to be a medical doctor. She's in med school. She's an atheist. She talks about the theory of evolution. Okay, well, look at her today. Today she has fake tits. She sells signed photographs of herself in a bikini. She advertises dildos. She does YouTube videos looking at the camera, talking about how the dildo gave her an orgasm.
And now she's probably going to be a family YouTuber because she just had a baby.
Who the fuck knows? So, right. Whatever degeneracy she goes on to next. Yeah. But my point is, like, if you were someone looking for a female intellectual idol on Instagram, on YouTube, but even at the library, even taking books off the shelf at the library, even published authors and women with PhDs, right? It's really slim. It's really grim. But the point is, the woman doing the selecting, the woman looking on Instagram, the person who's in the audience, right? What would motivate them to do that? Yeah. As opposed to just, hey, I'm going to look for YouTubers that make me feel bad about my own bad habits, that reinforce my vices. Like, I'm vain. I'm going to look for a YouTube channel that makes me feel better about my vanity. Mm-hmm. Whatever. You're a slut, so you subscribe to sex positive channels that are taking back the word slut and encouraging you to go out and sleep with 100 guys a year. That exists, There were men who do this also, by the way. It's just that's not the topic of this video, really. And I have made videos. I have made a lot of videos criticizing men's sexuality and the way men justify it. I really have. But anyway, but there are women who do that. On the opposite extreme, there are women who are Christian conservatives who only ever want to have sex with one guy and want to be part of this Christian marriage code. And they seek out those YouTube channels. But like, the point is, what you see in that self-affirming cycle, it makes the question as you posed it almost irrelevant. That's how role models die. Okay. It's that people get to choose their role models. You take a fucking look at the choices.
You might recall how I introduced that was that you had reminded me that I was frittering my time away at that time by making homemade soy milk and trying to do more, base my life around more zero waste habits and so on. So yes, I think that's a good observation that now that we have this freedom, we can choose to basically reinforce our own beliefs by who we follow. Yes, I do think at that time it's not like I looked up to anybody as an idol, but I probably was seeking out that content rather than looking for, I wasn't looking for the social media presence of female authors, or, I wasn't really paying attention much to female politicians at that time. So yeah, I do think that's true, but just kind of the in your face quality of a lot of those YouTube channels where it's just like, this is motherhood, or like, this is what it means to be a real woman or something. Right. Like, even if they don't directly say that, it's like, oh, you have to know how to, deal with cloth diapers. You have to, like, know all this stuff like in advance or whatever. Like this is the kind of thing that in the vegan movement, at least, like that's kind of how I felt like.
Yeah. To be fair, that you also were drawn to a lot of antinatalist content.
That was before, before
I know. I know, but I'm just saying that's another example where you had a tendency and you were looking for something.
True, absolutely, yeah. So anyway,
but yeah, the point is here also video game addicts can just seek out YouTube channels that reinforce their life as a video game addict and makes that seem normal.
Yes.
Whatever
absolutely.
it is you're into, you get into self-justification, whether people are thought of as role models or not.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So getting onto this idea of like female authorship versus male authorship, and okay, one thing is of course somebody who is a female author, somebody who has a PhD, somebody who is spending their time researching, they probably are not going to make a YouTube channel talking about their research. I mean, it might exist, like it's possible.
It exists.
I just haven't looked into it very much. But yes, I do think that this is still a problem, at least with what we've been reading lately, that most of the topics that I've been interested in, many of the most important books are written by men still, or have been written by men. And this is something that could be changed. Like, this is the generation where like women should be taking themselves seriously. And if it's not going to be you, then who is it going to be? And when I was younger, when I was in college, like I just didn't think of myself that way. I didn't think that I could have that kind of authorship, that kind of authority.
Okay. So look, though, I mean, this is really bringing it back to the very fundamental topic this video is about. I have done a lot of research lately that related to books I was trying to buy from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So this was, is this translation better than that translation? But I'm on Amazon buying some of these books, and some of them I'm deciding not to buy. You can get this stuff on the internet for free if you're okay with a certain type of text, reading a certain type of format. But I was looking up YouTube videos about these particular Greek and Roman authors, and sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's never been a single YouTube video about that author, about that book, about that topic, which is interesting to see. But when there were videos made by women, the intellectual standard they were holding themselves to was so much lower. So there's a video about Livy. So this is Livy, ancient Roman historian. And there was a woman, she'd done 2 different videos talking about a particular, I forget, it was just the Penguin edition or something, some mainstream edition of Livy. Mm-hmm. And, her whole manner of speaking and the level she's to, hi guys, well, I got this version of the book and let me tell you, I mean, there's, I'm really talking about substance here, not just style. It's possible to say something really substantive in that sing-song style, but no, she talked like a bimbo. She seemed like a bimbo. She acted like a bimbo. And I've got to tell you that the content was at dumb bimbo level. And I'm just being real. That particular woman, I think she could do better. I don't know her. If she tried, if she had that concept, you know what I mean? And when I saw other people's videos, so there was one guy, he was a kind of middle-aged, not very attractive white guy who did a video on the same thing. And he was instead looking at it in terms of the nitty-gritty of the different publishers and the different editions and stuff. And the whole tone is different. You know what I mean? And the standard he's holding, and he might not even be aware of it. He doesn't sit down in front of the camera and say to himself, okay, now I've got to say something really intelligent. I don't think he's working himself up or something. Or he's probably not watching the video afterwards and wondering, does this live up to my standards? It's something you embody after a certain point where you live your whole life answering to a higher standard. And look, I'm sorry, but AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you don't know what I'm talking about. If somebody is watching this video 10 years from now, when the initials AOC have become meaningless, right?
She's gonna be the queen of America.
What the fuck? AOC is such a moron. She's so stupid, and she's not even trying. And you wonder, well, couldn't you do better? She has her little crying fits. She feels so sad. She's sitting there writing on Twitter. If you want to know why I broke down crying the other day in the middle of that vote on Israel and Palestine, this is why. This is the reason. Because I'm being bullied all the time because of my position on Israel. Dude, man up. Dude, hold yourself to a higher standard. Dude, fuck your tears. Fuck your emotions. What do you think we elected you for? Are you supposed to be a leader or a follower or a fucking self-pitying, slobbering mess? What the fuck is this? Self-pitying, sobbing mess, I should say. Sobbing and slobbering are 2 different things.
Yes.
But and her whole little breakdown about how she thought she was going to die on January 6th was full of lies. my point is, like, I don't think AOC is born so different from me. I don't think this is a biological difference, but there's this profoundly corrosive, corrupting effect, of these lower expectations, right? And then these people that live their whole lives, they've never thought about, like, well, what am I really capable of? What's the higher standard I could be aspiring to? What should I be trying to live up to? You know what I mean?
Okay.
And yeah.
This might relate to something that you've said. It wasn't in the last video, the last live stream about advice to young men and quitting video games. But it was a video that you recorded recently, or a live stream. You were talking about the role of duty and honor. And sometimes you talk about Bronze Age values recently. Yes, I do think that this is lacking today. I think for both genders. I don't think it's really that much different for men and women. So I've heard what you've had to say about Bronze Age values for men, about how men will die for duty, will die for honor. What does it mean for women? What would you say that it would mean for women? And you could say for AOC in this example, if she's a politician, if she's been elected, what is her duty, and what does it mean to be an honorable person in that position?
So I'm giving you my 100% real answer. Okay. When my father talked about communism, so my father was a communist extremist. He wasn't a moderate, he was an extremist. He's thinking about history. He's thinking about what he would have done in different historical situations with the assumption that his life would be on the line. He's thinking about getting killed, risking his life. He's thinking about killing other people. He's thinking about living the rest of his life with blood on his hands from those events. When my mother is talking about the same fucking history, because my mother was also a communist nutcase during my childhood, during my teenage years when I was growing up, right? My mother is thinking about that, like, oh, men would take care of that. Oh, other people would fight and die and kill and be killed, and that doesn't have anything to do with me. She's thinking she gets to sit here on her throne knitting while other people fight and die. On a really deep level, there's a refusal to take responsibility, a refusal to see oneself as equal, and to see oneself as equally implicated. Like, it's blood on your hands too. Like, you're also part of the war effort, one way or another. Like, if you're a woman and you're a nurse in the war, like, I understand you're not pulling the trigger, but you're there. You're a woman and you're cooking food in a tent for the army. Like, you can explore in the army in a million ways. Like, I understand a very small number of women have a combat role, but, there are women who are helicopter, but like today, there are women who do all kinds of things. But, go back 50 years, there were very few roles for women in the military. But still, of really seeing yourself not as a passenger in politics, not as a passenger in history, but as being in the driver's seat. I'm just saying, this is a contrast between my father and my mother. Have I personally ever known any exception to the rule? Have I known any woman who reads about history, thinks about history, talks about history, feels about history, the way my father did, the way I do, the way most men who take these things seriously do? No, never. And I'll just give you a funny example. This is a pretty funny, harmless example. My ex-wife went to a PhD conference, some kind of academic conference or colloquium. And I think everyone there had a PhD in anthropology, or they were a student in the process of getting their PhD. It was a pretty elite kind of event. So these are all supposedly highly educated people. Maybe a few people were there from sociology, some other department. This is an elite academic. And so I'm sorry, I'm probably garbling this story to some extent. This is not super accurate. It's a really short story. And someone does a presentation that involves or mentions female circumcision, widespread throughout the Muslim world. And there's a good-looking white woman in the audience. Then the presentation ends, and it's question time. So this is like PhD level Q&A. And she stands up and she said, well, I think we should fly over there and bomb those people and force them to stop doing.
Wow.
And like, this is low. And a lot of these fields, they're like majority female. I think the majority of people at this event are female, and the one who's just presented are female. And it's like, well, if they won't stop doing this, like the army force. And the whole way of talking about it, like, I'm just saying, no, I'm not, a lot of men are stupid. A lot. like 90%. Okay, most men are stupid. This is not about a difference in intelligence. It's very different if a man sits there and says, look, I feel that this issue is so serious that I would be willing to join the army. I would be willing to put my life on the line for 5 years, for 10 years, and go out and do this. And you know what? I feel that if my own son were to go out and fight for this and kill people for this and maybe die for this or come back injured for this, I think that would be worth fighting. It's not just a difference in tone of voice, right? There's a difference between a fundamentally passive view of the world. Like, well, you know, the boys should go and take care of this issue. Like, you should go solve this for me. You should go solve this problem. I'm going to sit here and pass judgment about what's right and what's wrong. And then other people are going to solve the problem. Like, no. And I'm sorry, but for me, in a more subtle way, this came up again and again with the 2020 discussions about police reform.
Oh,
right.
okay.
So, like, you know, you had there were a lot of women in the discussion, including a lot of Black women, African American women.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, you know, okay, you are making this statement about how social workers instead of the police should reply to 911 calls. Okay. Yeah. And again, those people should do that. Okay. All right. It's very different if you say you're putting yourself in the driver's seat as someone who might do that job, someone who's experienced them, and say, look, someone says, look, I know what it's like to show up at someone's apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning and they're going crazy and you're not sure if you're going to get shot or stabbed. Like, I know what it's like to be the police in that position. Like, you're a police officer, you get a domestic violence call, and there's a man and a woman, and there's at least, maybe they're holding a knife. You don't know if there's a knife and a gun involved. You're coming into this apartment, and maybe they're both high on drugs or they're drunk. This, okay, domestic violence, you've got to come in and break it up, right? And guess what? I know that if you send in a psychiatrist or you send in a social worker, it's going to be just as hard for them or harder. And they're going to have a gun, and we're going to see, like, to really talk it through and to really say, hey, you know what? The police are doing a hard job, and I can imagine how hard it would be for me too. And to say, hey, I'm willing to do that job too. I'm willing to sign up and spend 5 or 10 years of my life putting my neck on the line. And, you know, it's not just some social worker who would do a better job. I think I could do a better job. And I recognize how hard that is to walk into the room and there were 2 people trying to beat each other up, and I have to break them. I have to shut this down without putting my own life in danger and without shooting and killing one of them. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Seeing history in the driver's seat, seeing that way. So sorry, I know this. Yeah. It may seem like a small thing, but I think this is one of the deepest and most pervasive differences, you know, between men and women, seen in aggregate, seen on a scale of millions of people.
Okay.
Are there exceptions? I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some women who think, but I've never met one. Just, you know, including all these women I knew with PhDs. I have never met one who thinks about politics in the present tense this way, police, military in the present tense, nor historically who look back and think about it that way. But I have met the opposite. I have met effeminate gay men who have attitudes, whether, you know, it's just a choice, I guess. I have met effeminate gay men who have a kind of dismissive, passive attitude towards history that way.
Okay.
Where it's like, oh, well, other people should conquer Afghanistan. Other people should get rid of the Taliban. And there's none of that real thought and commitment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's
I think that's a difference between you now versus you 5 years ago. I think now,
I've changed a lot way.
But like when you read,
because
even if it's a war that has nothing to do with you, reading the war and thinking about the concept, you're starting to personalize it.
So,
you're starting to have more ownership.
Yeah, before I met you, I'd started taking on more of this like personal responsibility in terms of like living a more ethical lifestyle. Like I embraced veganism, and right around the time that I met you, I embraced sobriety. You know, like I took on these different aspects of like what I did with my own time. But it is true, like it has taken me quite some time, and I still do struggle with like feeling like I have authority, like I have some kind of say in what happens in the world around me, you know. But if not by this age, like at what stage am I going to feel that way? Am I going to build up the knowledge and capabilities of like being able to influence? Yeah. Going to a town hall meeting, like going to city hall and presenting on these issues, you know, like at some point you have to step it up, and you have to, if you really care about these issues, you know. And I don't want to be just screaming at people on the street and protest about veganism. You know, I don't want to.
Let's be blunt. You don't want to sound as dumb as AOC. For
Yeah,
you too,
sure.
when you listen to AOC making some of these statements, like, whoa, you know,
That's true. Yeah.
I don't want to feel dumb when I see myself on YouTube or whatever on Twitter.
That's true.
And
Well,
that's
it still
AOC.
happens.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
still.
just giving it a real world comparison.
Yeah, no, that's true. If I ever do get the chance to be in a leadership role, you know, that is. Oh, okay. So this could relate to one thing as well that I wanted to discuss. So
we even said we've seen a bunch of mothers giving their political opinion lately that made them, you know, you don't want to sound like an idiot like that. But
Yes. Mothers giving their opinion about what books should be taught to their children in school. Yes, this is the kind of thing that has been in the news a lot lately. So something that I thought about more since I started my relationship with you. So it's been close to 5 years. And because I had this experience with being involved with your daughter when we were able to see your daughter, you know, it really got me thinking that the responsibilities that come with having a child, some, you know, for everybody, like everybody's responsibility when they have a child is to teach their children. And it's very obvious to me when I think about it in the home, like with parents and children, that is part of your responsibility. Like your children are going to ask you a lot of questions, and you have to be able to respond. You have to be able to answer. And if you don't, then you're setting your child up to be ignorant. But it's not as easy to see it outside of that context, I think, for a lot of people, when they have to think of themselves as political entities, or like people who could be interviewed on the news or something, you know, about a certain issue, or if they, you know, people who make YouTube videos, they know like this pressure to feel like they're saying something worthwhile, something that can make a difference. And actually educating people, that has really shifted throughout my years of knowing you, and growing into somebody that like feels like they would be able to answer a question. So, you know, something as simple as something that's come up in conversation with you, when you were a child, you remember asking, you remember that your mother asked you about the tides, how the tides work.
Yes.
So this is this kind of role reversal where you would think that the mother would be teaching the son about how the tides work. But then Aizul was in this position from a young age of like teaching his own parents, you know?
Yeah.
So this is this kind of backwards thing where, like, you know, once you start considering like taking on this role of being a mother, or like taking on this role of like having some kind of authority in the world, mothering other people in some other sense. You know, what do you really know? And like all the years that you should have been preparing for that, if you've been playing video games, if you've been making homemade soy milk or something, like in some ways, like that's just gonna set you up for failure, set you up for being a dumb person.
So look too. So there was a woman, and you will see Melissa is not disturbed by my mention this. There was a woman who basically tried to steal me away from you. And this relationship was never in any danger that way. And it wasn't clear when she started talking to me. It probably wasn't clear to her either. That's what she was after. She started talking to me, and whatever. I didn't know that was what was up. And to say, she also might not have known what was that. But a couple months later, she revealed. She said, "Look, that what she wants is for me to dump Melissa and get together with this other woman instead." And she is a conventionally good-looking blonde, and she just can't imagine how I look at this. Because, you know, for her as a woman, you know, I was trying to be friends with her. She's someone I'd known, you know, on and off for a couple of years. Someone I you know, she's vegan, and I can say some positive things about her. But so you're asking the question of like, once you become a parent, once you become a mother, what do you have to teach somebody? Like, what do you have to offer? Like for this woman, like the way she lived her life, I would not say she's an alcoholic or anything like that. But it's that working for the weekend lifestyle. She's going out and drinking alcohol and partying. She's living a really shallow, meaningless life that revolves around, in my opinion, fancy shoes and going out with friends and drinking and partying. And she was someone who had sex or one-night stands with an alarming number of complete strangers while living this kind of club-hopping lifestyle. Remember, this was ages ago we talked about this. You know. But like, now, you know, I did not say this to her, and she can't imagine seeing it this way. Her perspective on life is that she's a good-looking woman, And practically every guy absolutely wants to get with her the moment she opens the door a crack. You remember, I told you about this too, because this was at the stage where it wasn't clear, like, is she trying to seduce me or what? And I remember one of the things she said to me is, she said, look, the fact that I'm talking to you at all means a lot. It means something. Yeah. She kind of, then it was like a couple months after that. It's like, yeah, like, I had effectively friends on her. But my point is this, like, it had not occurred to her. She had never thought, like, from my perspective, from the perspective of a guy like me, like, she is bringing nothing to this relationship. She has absolutely no intellectual substance. Now, I can't say too much about this, but during the time that I was talking to her, there were really remarkable political events unfolding that I was talking to Melissa about. And any of you are my personal friends. I was talking to these. It was 2020. I'll just say, but there were these big political events happening in 2020. And I was getting inspired to write my book. I think I hadn't started writing the book yet, but I'm reading about this politics, and I'm talking to Melissa about any other friends I had at that time. I'm talking to them about what's going on politically. And when I try to talk to her, when I try to talk to this good-looking blonde, there is nothing. I might as well be talking to a wall, right? So that's what I mean. Like, we're not talking about the intellectual standards here being incredibly high. Yeah. But my fundamental point is just, like, she was someone who, it had not occurred to her. You know what I mean? Like, oh, if you want this kind of man, if you want this kind of life, and indeed, if you want to move on to being a good parent, if you want to be a good role model, like, no, like, your intellectual development, your intellectual substance, and your political acumen, that all really matters. And I do think she's an example of someone who lived the life of being a good-looking blonde in America, where these things are at a real premium, and just never held herself to any higher standard. Never.
That's
and you guys already know, I did mention this. The way that ended was me saying to her, look, I basically said to her, look, the situation is not like I'm with Melissa, therefore I can't be with you. I said to her really clearly, there is no parallel universe where you and I would become a couple. Like, if I weren't with Melissa, if I were single, like, you have to understand, this is, you would not be honest. It's for this reason. So now look, I'm not going to make the claim that men are by contrast omniscient or something, but of course, the vast majority of men get that. The vast majority of men understand that women do not want to be with a stupid man. They do not want to be with a fool. The vast majority of women, there's a very obvious pressure on you. You were talking about the role of a mother. Talk about the role of being a father and so on. That women do expect, whether it's articulated or not. They expect you to be a man of substance, a man of, So that's there. And in my whole life, I think I've only ever talked to one man who didn't get that. But with the exception of some really mentally disabled people, I think all men know that there is this pressure on them all the time. And then how they deal with it and what they do with it, that's another story. Yeah. Because for sure, some escape into a life of drug addiction and video games. Like, some of them try to evade it or whatever. But that there is this big expectation. Mm-hmm. And what do you want to say? Yeah. You want to talk more about that woman?
No, I think I covered what I wanted to say about that. Yeah.
But okay, let me just say this. I don't think any man would need you to explain to him why he's being rejected if he's rejected for not being smart enough, not being substantive enough, not being intellectual enough. Like, it's not going to be like, what? This is never. And, that was a situation with a woman where, like, despite the fact that she's watched my YouTube videos for years, whatever, it's like, it hasn't occurred to her that what I'm about is the life of the mind. And, like, so just giving this out as advice for everyone, if you have really great sex with somebody, still, taking a walk with Melissa the other day, and it's like, look, what makes this walk pleasant, it's not the smoothness of the sidewalk, it's not the color of the sky, it's not the sight of the ocean, it's taking a walk with you, it's taking a walk with someone who's worth talking to, it's taking a walk with someone you intellectually respect, someone who has something intelligent to say back to you, like, having even a walk with someone you're attracted to or have great sex with, like,
True.
In the absence of the life of the mind, it's really nothing worth.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. I guess I could say more. But that I think we
Sure.
did a good job of talking about that. Yeah. I guess.
You got conclusions? No. The conclusion is it's hopeless.
Well, no, it kind of relates to something else that I wanted to say. Yeah, I do find that funny that she said it means a lot that I'm talking to you.
Yes, I told you about that at the time too.
Yeah. I guess I had forgotten that, but yeah. What
she had a boyfriend at that time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was the other thing. She had a boy. I had a girlfriend. She had a boyfriend. And you're telling me it means a lot.
What do you think that you have to offer though? Like when you are talking with people,
Yeah.
I don't have very inflated ideas about what I what I have to offer in a conversation or what I have to offer other people. But yeah, no, that is funny to me.
Okay, you say that, but in a specific context, it's not true. So I'll give you a specific context. We both decided not to study here at the University of Victoria, right? Long story short, we were considering, we both went up to the university campus, whatever.
Yeah.
No, if you were sitting and talking to those kids, if you're talking to a typical, let's say 19-year-old, doesn't matter if they're male or female. And like, you may not think you know a lot about the politics of China or the politics of Japan or whatever's come up, the politics of Hong Kong, for example, currently unfolding, but you do. And when you be sitting down in that context with those kids having those conversations, be like, no, that's not what the situation's like in Hong Kong at all. Xinjiang, Western China, like, no, look, what else? So, I mean, it's kind of easy for you to say that you don't feel you have something to contribute. Now, another example is vegan activism. If you're sitting down with other, frankly, it doesn't matter if they're 19 or 39, you could be sitting down with other people who are super gung-ho about vegan activism, but they don't know what you know. And you're like, look, it's not like that. Like, I know something, I have something to share. So, I mean, it's fine for you to say that, but I really think in praxis, in any kind of social context you sit down in, that's really not true. That you are aware of what you have to contribute and the ways in which you can really help other people. Whether or not you do, because you can just sit there silently. You can just sit there listening to people who are talking about vegan activism, how they're going to volunteer for DXD. You can just sit there listening to people talk about Xinjiang or Myanmar or Rohingya Muslims or something. You can sit there and just be like,
yeah, like you said earlier.
But you are not unaware, even if you're silent. But even if you're silent, you know that you have something. That's all I'm saying. Go on, yeah.
But it would take effort to try to prove somebody, or, to try to convince somebody that what they're saying is ignorant or they just aren't aware of certain things. Yeah. And also you don't want to make people break down crying. Like you mentioned earlier, this kind of, social.
So this is also gender coded massively, right? You saw me sit down with a university professor. So this is not a student, this is a professor.
Yeah.
He said a bunch of crass bullshit about Xinjiang. And I basically said, I didn't want to change the topic of conversation. I said, look, we're not going to get into talking about Xinjiang, but look, I can tell you've never read one book on this subject. You don't know what you're talking about. You're repeating stuff you read in the New York Times. You don't know the first fucking thing you're talking about.
Right.
And that was a conversation that was very much man to man. It really was. And, I wasn't being mean-spirited. I wasn't trying to be denigrating to him. But, he's a university professor. I am a student. And that was a real challenge as authority. And you got to see how we dealt with it. That was neither the first nor the last challenge as authority. Like throughout that whole conversation, there were a whole bunch of points where I was basically telling him, look, you're talking out of your hat. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I do. I know a lot about that. And, you see how that goes.
Yes.
Now, I think you've seen me demonstrate it. I think most women in our culture, but in every culture I'm familiar with, they don't know how to have a conversation like that.
Yeah.
And whether that's fear-based or fragility-based or what, and I mean, you could try. You've seen me do it. You know what I mean? You could try. And both sides might not know how to handle it. Like if you talk to a woman that way, how is she going to respond? If you talk to a man that way, how's he going to, and that's running up against exactly this whole culture of holding women to lower standards. And for real, if you had said to that same professor the same things I said, I don't think he would have fought back the way he did with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sure. And I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm just saying without being I think probably the response would go, oh, good for you. Oh, good for you, dear. There would have been more. Oh, so you've read some books about Xinjiang. Oh, so, like, good for you. Oh, that's great. Good to hear. Good to hear I think you really get more of this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and not like, look, bro, I just showed the emperor has no clothes and the emperor is you.
Yeah.
You're ignorant and a liar, frankly, and I've just shown it.
Yeah.
That I'm not just saying about the one instant that happened again and again in that conversation. Just saying.
Okay. So the last time that we talked about this, or that you had a podcast, or you had a live stream that you were talking about, like advice for young men, you mentioned that you didn't get into topics of sexuality. I would say we've succeeded again in this live stream with not really discussing. I've seen the audience, the chat has kind of veered off into some topics about sexuality and relationships and so on. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you feel like we've reached a point that we should conclude, or do you think that we should go on to other topics? Because I'm open-minded. But...
Look, maybe that's got to be a separate live stream where we just talk about the sexy stuff for both genders.
Yeah.
But it is supposed to be about the life of the mind and being an intellectual.
Yes.
And I mean, I think the very basic point that's been alluded to again and again, without getting into it in greater depth, is just,
okay,
this is an obstacle to the life of the mind, and it's an obstacle for women in a way that it isn't for men. Go on.
Okay, but I will say one thing that I could say here is, in relation to your romantic life, your love life, and your sex life, it really does matter who you get involved with.
Of course.
And
totally.
Yes, from personal experience, like, take it from me, like, it's really important to be with somebody that's going to continue to learn. And
so I don't trivialize this at all. If anything, I melodramatize it. I exaggerate this and this. But look, I knew a man. He was a white guy, and he lost his virginity with a prostitute in the Philippines. He flew to the Philippines, so that was his first sexual experience with women. And that was not I don't know how many prostitutes he slept with, but he slept with some number of prostitutes since then, Asian prostitutes. That impacted and influenced the rest of his life on so many levels. Like, there's no way to exaggerate the warping, distorting effect it had on his intellectual development, his emotional development, his ethical development, right?
Yeah. From
his teenage years forward. Now, it's very easy to draw some advice from that. My advice is, don't sleep with whores, whatever, especially if you're under 25 years old or something. If you're a young man, don't sleep with prostitutes. I really think it'll do harm to you as a young man being the client, not talking about the prostitutes. I really think this can affect you in ways you yourself as a teenage man can't understand. That's my advice on that. Okay, so obviously for women, that is not the problem. I mean, how many women lost their virginity by paying a male prostitute? Like, it's going to be incredibly close to zero. You know what I mean? For how many women is their sexual development warped because they are the client, they are the John, as we say, paying someone? It's not. But for women,
it's pretty rare.
Yeah, but for women, instead, you have this avalanche of male attention coming into your life, right? And I'm sorry, but there was a comment above. It's now many minutes ago of someone saying that she does have women in her family who are medical doctors and surgeons, but they only get positive feedback. They only get appreciation from the family when they cook a 7-course meal, when they cook a big dinner. That's what's rewarded. Well, for the most part, for women, for many years of their life, starting at a shockingly young age and continuing, certainly throughout their teenage years, what women find is rewarded is a certain kind of sexually salacious activity. So sure, that becomes this massive, source of influence in women's life and in their intellectual development.
Yeah.
And,
I think it's it's a huge part of it. And for many years I wanted to really separate my intellectual life from my sexual life, thoughts about sexuality are inherently degenerate and are not related to discussions about philosophy, history, let's completely separate these issues. But I really think that sexuality is a part of everybody's life. Everybody has a sexuality, and dealing with that, discovering that, and exploring that, and understanding yourself, that is something that it's not separate from your intellectual life. It's not separate from what you're researching or what you're reading about, you know.
But look, I have never met a woman who openly said, I don't have to read about politics and history and philosophy because I'm beautiful. But I have met so many women who implicitly believe that. And like, it's not that hidden behind this. Like they will say that to you.
Too pretty for that.
Yeah. No. And that's incredibly fucked up.
That's terrible.
No.
Like,
But that's the culture we live. That's the century we live in. No, like for real. And nobody's going to hold them to a higher standard. And they never hold themselves to a higher standard. And no man is ever going to say to them, and nobody within their family is going to say to them, nobody gives a fuck that you have big tits. You know, like whatever it is that makes them stand out. Nobody gives a fuck that you have a nice ass. That ain't worth shit. You know, you have to hit the books. You have to accomplish something. You have to be somebody. You have to make something out of yourself. You know, fuck you, you shallow, vain imbecile. You know, that was it. Okay, but if you have a dude who has that attitude, you know, there are good-looking guys. There are guys who get behind their looks.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But a man would feel ashamed to say that or exhibit that attitude. I mean, he's at least going to keep up the illusion that he's a refined intellectual. So it's maybe complete bullshit. You know,
yeah,
maybe. I'm just saying. My point is the obstructive nature of female vanity in our culture, in our century, in all the cultures I'm familiar with. That has this really amazing, like whatever you say, toxic effect, corrosive effect on female intellectual development, emotional development, you know, everything else, where they haven't even considered. Now, look, we have a new book out. There's a hit book out by, Little Water is laughing. It says, LMAO, my ass is pretty. We just watched a video the other day from this girl, and that's all she cares about. This YouTuber who was talking about having pretty face privilege and pretty ass privilege.
Yeah.
She's like, now she got plastic surgery on her ass. That big ass. Like, now when I go to the nightclub, I'm that bitch. Everyone pays attention. Like those are the fucking horizons of her life, you know.
She's made no
lot
intellectual
of women.
Development over the
None.
years. She's still
zero. Hasn't read a book since high
teenage
school.
Level of my ass is not big enough.
Oh, that's her whole life.
Compared to the music videos I watched.
But look, so no woman will ever say to you that their whole life consists of competing for male attention or competing with other women for who's the prettiest woman in the office or who's the prettiest woman in their classroom. But like, dude, a lot of women live their whole lives by those rules. You know, that's what's going on for a lot of women all the time. And has this massively mentally deadening effect, you know, and it doesn't have to. I mean, it doesn't have to. How many hours a day are you doing your hair and makeup?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like if you want to be beautiful, okay, check, done. For some people, it is effortless. Some people don't have to put any effort into being beautiful. They're born with what it takes. And now what about actually developing yourself as an intellectual, as an author, as a creative person, as an analytical person, however you want to think of it?
Yeah, one of my essays in college was about my choice not to wear makeup. If I had really been more objective about my writing, I could have, you know, there's a way to make that essay interesting, but like, man, it's embarrassing to look back on that.
Yeah.
But, you know, like my perspective on it.
You've shown me some of your college writing.
My college writing, and I got straight A's in all of my English courses. Like my
and
professors,
nobody was holding you to a higher standard.
Yeah, my professors, I thought I was a pretty good writer because all of my professors gave me A's, and
no one's saying to you, this would never be published.
Of course, I didn't even think that. No, right. It was just like, this is for this.
Nobody said,
getting
nobody said you should compare yourself to the greatest authors in your field and try to be at that level.
I did not. Right. No, there's no way I could write like Tolstoy. You know, I couldn't write.
Well, you can.
But that's what. That
was. You didn't think that way.
I certainly no.
Right.
No. I thought of myself as yeah, no way. So yeah, that is just interesting to reflect on. That in that same class, actually, I had a fellow student who wrote her essay, because this was a writing class and we were trying to talk about personal experiences. So her essay was about her experience being a cam girl. So somebody who was close to my age, maybe she was a year older or something, because I was young for my grade, but somebody who had been through a lot more sexually than I had, had put herself out there way more than I had, like I would have never considered going into porn. I would have never considered being a cam girl at that age, at that stage in my life. But like, she had already developed this way, like this mature way of thinking about her sexuality, about
commodifying her sexuality, making money out of it.
It's true. Yeah. Commodifying
her sexuality as her career.
Yes. Yeah. And it's somewhat destructive. And, she talked about, in response to my essay about makeup, she talked about like for her, like she was a makeup addict. Like she was always buying new makeup and stuff. And at the time I was just like, wow, I mean, like that's what you're spending your time on. You're spending your time on like putting dildos inside of you on camera and putting makeup on your face for this audience and stuff, that is, and she's making money from that, it's just.
I'm going to mention though, so there was a comedy called Tropic Thunder. So if you guys, when I was a kid, I was involved in the theater. If you spend time in the theater around actors, like most of the male actors are also really good looking guys, and they're guys who are there because they're good guys. But a movie like Tropic Thunder is making fun of male actors. But when you're around male actors, every single one of them is a pretentious fuck. Every single one of them has a stack of books about like philosophy and politics and history and shit he's carrying around. Like they're reading Nietzsche and talking about Nietzsche, like was to use a stereotype, whatever it is they're reading at the time. But seriously, they can be reading stuff from ancient Greece too. There are some jokes in Tropic Thunder about the ancient Greeks. There's a joke about Aristophanes, like, yeah, Aristophanes is so hot right now. Like, it's like they're these shallow kind of male model, like they're these good-looking guys, really shallow. But those guys still, they are at least trying, like that's what the jokes are about them. They're still trying to front like they're intellectuals, or they're actually trying to be intellectuals. They're trying to develop, when you talk to male actors, and I got to tell you something, you hang around female actors, and the vast majority of them have this attitude we've been describing. They have the attitude of, I'm that bitch. Like, I was the prettiest girl in my high school. Everybody wanted to fuck me. Like everyone makes exceptions for me. I get to skip in line, like whatever. They really have the attitude that that's it. They're a beautiful woman and that's all they ever need to be. And that's all they're going to be. And they feel no pressure on themselves to pretend to be an intellectual or make any effort to develop that way. So I just say acting as a microcosm, you maybe see that all displayed a little bit more openly. Now I would say also guys at the gym or something, guys who are personal trainers. You see girls who are female personal trainers, or female instructors, and that's it. It's just, hey, I'm hot, period. And the men who are in that role are like, well, yeah, I'm hot, but I've studied nutrition, I've done this, I've done that. I know all this technical sports medicine stuff. Like where you really see this, where men aren't living with the idea of I'm hot and that's all I need to be. Like that's, for me, that's the roof, that's the limit, that's the sky. And you see women who are really limiting themselves because that's how they think of themselves. And dude, this applies to ugly women as well. I cannot tell you how many women I've known who are really unattractive, where everything we've just said applies to them. They don't work as actresses. They don't work as trainers. Woo! We don't even want to. You've grown up around this. There are women who are like, I'm fat. So what? Plenty of guys want to get with me. I'm still fine. I'm still good. There are women who are still on an ego trip. They're fat and they're ugly, but they still have men climbing over each other to compete for their attention and stuff. And like,
I suppose that is true. I guess it's just what I was thinking at that time, to start this is that I do think that you can take a philosophical attitude about sexuality and about beauty, and that's really actually something that I would encourage young women to get interested in and to really live the examined life in this way. Like for that woman who wrote her essay about being a cam girl, like at least she was talking about these experiences, and in some ways she was more developed than me, like sexually, of course. Like, I mean, she had at least had these experiences and talked about these issues with other people that I hadn't. And like just in that way, having conversations with other people, having these other experiences, like that is part of becoming an intellectual, like, and being able to converse about certain issues, like rather than looking down your nose at somebody who might engage in those behaviors, like that isn't helpful. And I might have learned something from actually becoming a better, like closer to her if I had gotten to know her more.
Yeah.
I knew a woman also briefly who worked as a stripper when she was in college, and I again, like I wish I would have made the effort to get to know her a little bit more, because I might have just learned about that aspect of life, that aspect of human sexuality, and embracing like feminine sexuality, like in ways that I was too uncomfortable to talk about at that time. So yeah, I do think that can be part of intellectual development. Just getting to know people with different experiences, and it can be kind of, you might think,
but like, look, you're getting the fundamental implicit point of this whole video is don't let your sexuality be a limit to or an obstacle to your intellectual development.
Yes.
Your emotional development, etc. Like that is the point.
Yeah.
Like you live in a body. We all do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
But it is. But for the vast majority of people, it is. They never get over it. They never deal with the building blocks of what it is to have a meaningful life, or what it is to just be a human being on planet Earth. They never get past it. They never get over it. And I think middle age and old age are very miserable for those people. That's all they learn how to do. What is old age going to be like for Emily Ratajkowski? Emily Ratajkowski has just published her fucking autobiography, her political essay / autobiography. My Body, right? And I'm sorry, but Emily Ratajkowski, her whole fate has been shaped by the way her body looks and the way her face looks. She also has a very striking face. Her facial features are very clearly delineated. And everyone told her, I forget, starting when she was 14 years old or something,
right.
People told her, look, you can have a career in modeling.
You're going
to have it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, guess what? That didn't mean you couldn't develop intellectually in 10 different ways. That doesn't mean you couldn't have, she'd be in a better position than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who started a career as a waitress or whatever, Doesn't mean you couldn't have become a major political leader or a major author. But she's a fucking bimbo. She's an idiot. I'm sorry. Look at any live interview, any unscripted interview she's done. I don't care how many fucking ghostwriters she worked with in putting that book together. If the book has a little bit of intelligence, I don't care. Watch any interview with her. Like everything that's wrong with America is wrong with Emily Ratajkowski. She's a horrifying glimpse into the, mainstream middle class American mind. And she is a pretty girl who cares about shoes and clothes, and that's it. My point being, the fact that you made your living out of your body didn't have to prevent you from developing intellectually.
Right.
But it does for the vast majority of people. It provides the pretext or the excuse for that. And at the opposite extreme, so I was friends with this YouTuber, American Unicorn. She was a virgin until marriage, and she let that ruin her life. She was on the super trad con, conservative, religious virgin until marriage. That fucked up her life. Like your sexuality can screw up your life, and like commodifying your sexuality in that sense can screw up your life in more ways than one. It can be that you're committed to being a virgin until marriage, and then you drop out of college, get pregnant, and raise kids with the first person who has sex with you, and that ruins your life instead. So no, I mean the relationships you have, as I put it right at the very beginning of the video, letting someone come into your life, letting a man come into your life and solve all your problems.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember.
That's an incredible temptation, even if there's no pornography involved, there's no modeling involved, they're not being an actress.
Yeah.
You're just becoming a housewife or whatever. Even if you have a job, where that's. And again, there's no reason for that to be all you are. You could have all these ambitions. You could do all these. You could be a housewife and you can still develop yourself, and you could accomplish all kinds of great things.
That's true.
And the vast majority do not. The vast majority let this be an obstacle, let this be a limit to their learning, and they shut down and they remain fundamentally childish, stupid, ignorant people all their lives.
Yeah. So to avoid that, well, I did not live my life in an intellectual way when I was a young woman, when I was 19, 20, and 21. I can imagine an alternate universe where I would have really taken myself seriously and stuck to the kind of high expectations that I had for like how I how I behaved like in high school, when I was sober, when I didn't surround myself with people who were doing drugs and so on. Like if I had just stuck to some of these kind of good qualities of how I lived my life, yeah, I can imagine that I would have read a lot more and I would have pushed myself more. But also, if people would have held me to higher standards, if my professors would have, like you said, like encouraged me to write
Yeah.
at a level that I would feel comfortable publishing this, like how many people are going to read this, and yeah, if you think of yourself as somebody who could become an author one day, or somebody
Right.
who could
Yep.
change the world in some way, you know, your outlook on life, your perspective on yourself, and your perspective on your role in the world will change a lot. So yeah, that is the advice that I would have for young women, is to imagine that in the future you know, part of what you said in your last live stream about advice for young men is like, you can't, part of your role as an older person is to tell young people what they can't imagine.
Yes.
And so yeah, I feel like, although I'm not as old as you, like I do kind of feel like I'm at a stage where I can say that, like, you can't imagine the kind of people that you'll know in 10 years. You can't imagine the type of person that you'll be in 10 years, or you can't imagine the regrets that you might have about how you're living your life right now. And I mean, that's part of the tragedy of life, is that we don't know what we're going to regret, but it's better to regret that you tried your best to become a more intellectual person. It's better to regret that you didn't go out and party or something, like, you know, that you didn't you know, waste your time when you were younger playing video games. Like, if you have regrets about your life when you're a youth that are related to that, like, I wish I would have wasted more time, I wish I would have gone to more clubs or something, like, it's way better to be in a position where you actually learn something and push yourself intellectually.
You know, I think it's true. Probably something I overlook about myself was just the assumption that I was going to be an author. And I remember talking to other young people that way. This was the era before YouTube, when, you know, I didn't assume I was making monologues, assume I was going to be writing. But, you know, like, once you have that view of what it is to be an adult, that being an adult means being an author, well, it doesn't matter that much what your major is in university, because whatever it is, you're preparing to be an author, right? Like, you're preparing to write, you're preparing to change the world through writing, or share whatever you have to share, to speak for yourself, you know, as a writer, you know. You know, but I mean, to give an example, for a long time I considered going into law, getting a law degree, which is incredibly boring. But if you're thinking about being a writer, you're like, yeah, but really, I'm going to write books. That's, you know, that's what really matters. Like, however, it doesn't matter if I work at 7-Eleven or Starbucks or work as a lawyer, but I'm trying to cultivate myself to be an author. That's ultimately what really matters.
Yeah.
And then also, you've been with me in periods of time. I considered going to business school and getting a degree in business.
Yes.
But I'm not doing that instead of being an author. Like, I'm still thinking of myself as a creative writer, as someone who's doing research, someone who's learning, and someone who's writing. You know, so I already had that idea, like at 15 or 16 or something. And then in an unseen way, that guides all my development. And yeah, you know, I think the tragedy is there are a lot of women who just regard themselves as a piece of ass. There are a lot of women, they don't think of themselves as an author. It's never crossed their mind that their intellectual development is matter.
Right.
And you know, I think the flip side of that, there are some men think of themselves as a piece of ass. But I would say what's much more common is that men think of themselves that way in terms of money. Where men reduce themselves to just how much money they earn, how much they pay for things, including paying for the attention of women, where they've reduced themselves to being a kind of economic atom, an economic cog in the system.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to saying, well, no, you can earn money lots of different ways. You can work in real estate and be an intellectual. Now, as mentioned, you can be a stripper and be an intellectual. You can develop yourself as an author. You can change the world, and you change who you are too. You grow, and you know.
Yeah.
But yeah. I know we're having this conversation after the death of the publishing industry. So that model, you know, if you take the word author in its dictionary sense, I can't say that anymore. Now you have to talk more broadly about being some kind of creative artist, some kind of content creator, you know.
But still, I really do think that, you know, there are some comments, maybe everybody's not smart enough. Somebody says, Some people who just aren't very bright, though, drinking and partying may be all they can manage unless things were
Yeah.
different than that. Okay, so no,
I don't believe it for an instant. Go on,
yeah, I think we all have something to offer. And when I was younger, what I was told about being a professor is that it can be demanding because there's this idea of publish or perish. Like you have to publish. But I do think that this is something that is healthy for people to continue to challenge themselves, is to think of themselves as people who publish something, who are trying to make something throughout their life. I mean, doing something with their time, even if it's just on a small scale of like in your community, if you're making some effort to.
Right. But look, sorry, I just made a video the day before yesterday or something about Tana Mongeau. The fact that all Tana Mongeau can appreciate today is getting drunk and partying. That does not mean that's all she's capable of appreciating.
Oh yeah, she used to be vegan. She used to care about veganism and like talk about it. Like now, what?
No,
so
I
what
totally
happened,
think
you know?
I totally think she's someone of above average intelligence, which is scary, but it's the fucking truth.
Mhm.
But you live that way long enough, you lower your expectations of yourself long enough, and this seems like the only thing you can enjoy. Same with video game addiction. There are people who say, "Oh, well, they're too stupid to enjoy anything but playing video games because that's all they know how to enjoy. They don't know how to get the value out of." Research and writing, or all kinds of other humanitarian work, or climbing a mountain, or anything else. But like they don't know how to enjoy the life of the mind. Is really what I'm emphasizing here, rather than climbing a mountain. But no, I don't believe that about Tana Mongeau, and I don't believe that about Emily Ratajkowski. I don't think she's born dumb. She's someone who made the wrong choices. She chooses to be dumb, and now this is who she is, and this is all she can enjoy. And she still could change in the next 10 years, the next 20 years. It'll take time and hard work. You know what I mean? And I'd encourage her to, Emily, if you're watching this now, but it's not too late to take life seriously and really live with that, with the sorrow and the joy that comes with the life of the mind, and take that on. Yeah. But no, I don't believe that for an instant. And my view of the world, where I say like 90% of people are fundamentally stupid and malign, fundamentally stupid and have bad intentions, are malicious. It's even more tragic when you understand that what I'm saying is that they choose this. People choose to live this way the same way they choose to play video games. The fact that you play video games, or like the only thing you can enjoy doing is playing video games. You were not born this way. You're not. It's not because you're mentally disabled. Right. And then you get into a cycle, a self-justifying cycle of, the meaningless, a meaningless life, Yeah. Do you want to say those to wrap it up, babe? I mean, I think we've said it all.
Yeah. I think
how to be a woman, according to Melissa Damon.
That's funny. I hadn't thought of how to actually end this. So to conclude this video, I mean, because it's something that I'm still learning about, and I'm still embracing, as I get older, like my feminine, like being a woman, what it means to be a woman, and to it was interesting to me to hear you say that you've never felt that any woman that you've known has viewed history in the way that men have, that they've actually like been taking on this role. Like, if they're going to have a view on the war in Afghanistan,
kind of sympathizing actively, put it that way.
Yeah, right. I don't think it's impossible for women to think of themselves as active participants in history as it unfolds. Like I don't, and there are plenty of women in history that we have to look up to. Women that involved with
plenty. Go on. Yeah. Sarah, but if you're keeping it real, that's not true. You're talking about your own life. Who are the women in history you've looked up to? You haven't had any. I mean, you were saying that earlier. I mean, it's just, why say the opposite of the truth? I mean,
Okay, it's true. I haven't.
You personally, you don't look up to
Hillary Clinton or something, like But I'm thinking about
Condoleezza Rice. You don't look up to her. You don't. I mean, you haven't grown up with women you love, whether they're alive now or from the past. I don't think you do. Just keeping it real. I'm not faulting you. I'm saying, look, I had to name my daughter. And so when I was with my ex-wife, and it was a planned pregnancy, even it wasn't an accidental pregnancy. We planned to get pregnant. And it's like, okay, we have a list of really great names for a boy that are historical figures, right? And then like for a girl, it's like, I guess it's just one. Like it was so hard to come up with a name. Female intellectuals in history you look up to or think positive. There aren't a lot. Like we're just keeping it real here, people. And like, I gave my daughter a name. I'm proud of the name I gave her. I'm happy with the name I gave her. But I didn't have 10 other names. I didn't have a list of really great names from great historical figures. It's like, okay, I guess I can name her after this one historical figure. Now I've used up all my good female baby names, and there are all these different male names. That's stuff we sometimes just joke around today about good names for a boy and stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying
of
you
course,
haven't
the
lived
ones
up
that-
with you haven't grown up with plenty of female
I guess
positive
so.
roles. So you grew
When
up
I
with
was-
Britney Spears.
Okay. All right, fine. I guess we're just talking about, but figures from history that I was told about, somebody like Rosa Parks or somebody like Harriet Tubman, that was the kind of influence that I had when I was growing up.
Yeah. Okay.
In
So let's say
the
they're good.
civil
So
rights
let's
movement.
okay.
Yeah.
Rosa Parks, was she an intellectual? Was she a great writer? Was she an inspiring leader? No. None. Harriet Tubman saying no. Like it's just keep it real. No, you don't grow up with female role models to look up to. You don't. Or there are incredibly few. Again, maybe there are some interesting exceptions to the rule. I mean, look at this shelf of books. Who do we have of any of the authors of any of these books? Who do you have to look up to as female? I think there's one book written by a woman on our bookshelf, and it sucks. It's
I
terrible.
think Maya Angelou was a communist, right? At least a
we're not
communist sympathizer. Anyway,
don't get into people's books you
yeah.
haven't read. I mean, if you haven't read it, don't comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But I just say no. I mean, Rosa Parks, it's not an exception. I'm sorry. I mean, Marie Curie is not an exception. None of these people, none of these people are Tolstoy. None of these people are Mohandas Gandhi. And I'm a critic of Gandhi. But no, none of these people are major intellectuals and creative writers. And people who, change the world by living the life of the mind. They're not. Now look, my ex-girlfriend, one of them, she wanted to be a painter. And I remember her going through these different magazine articles. She was actively looking for examples of successful female painters. And so this is interesting. This ends up being a kind of counter story. She found this article, and it was like the next generation of modern artists, female modern artists in the 21st century. And it was someone who had done like a survey of who are the hot new female painters and sculptors in the arts today. And then 10 years later did a retrospective saying, where are they now? And the article she wrote, it's a female author, was like completely condemning these women and saying, well, guess what? It seems like the vast majority of women just don't care about anything except getting pregnant and having kids. And like the majority of the women who were in the exhibition 10 years ago, they found a wealthy husband and got pregnant and have kids, and they don't produce art anymore and they don't take it seriously. And like, here are the one or two exceptions, and here's what they're doing. And it's like, well, and like the article concluded, because basically none of them were doing important new art or even devoting their time to art anymore. It was like some of them were still doing it as a side project. It's like, well, guess what? I guess the reason why in our generation there aren't like major inspiring female intellectuals in painting is that there really aren't women who make this their priority and dedicate their lives to it the way men do. Men who say like, no, nothing, like this is my art. This is what matters. This is what I'm giving 110%. I remember, anyway, just remember that was her situation. She was someone, again, she'd been a feminist and she'd been involved in women's studies.
Yeah, I know.
But she had to admit, she's like, well, all of the artists she looks up to, right? And which is they're all men,
Okay.
Ancient
And another
modern,
thing, because I'm vegan, it is also striking to me that like so few people in history generally, but also women, like, were vegan. Like I don't have a lot of positive vegan role models. It's a female.
When you were doing ancient history of veganism and stuff, it's all male authors and male.
Yeah, it's true. So I hope this changes. I mean, it is one of the aspects of being a woman. You do, if you want to have kids. I mean, it does take up. Yeah,
I was just challenging you about the casualness of saying in passing.
No, you're
this
right.
whole conversation, like, oh well, there are lots of positive female role models. Are there? Are there? Like, I feel I've been in a couple of the fields that are exceptions, like Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist studies. There are some major female. I'm just mentioning.
Totally fine
but like,
for you to challenge
no,
me
but that's
that.
the point. Is keep it real. And no, it's part of your problem. Like there weren't. I mean, who you're going to look up to? Emily Ratajkowski? You're going to look up to Christina Aguilera? Christina Aguilera was who was on TV during your childhood. That's your generation. Yeah. Who the fuck are you going to look up to? And who right now there are women who would say look up to AOC. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a fucking nitwit. She's an idiot. The women who are the leaders of Black Lives Matter are idiots. And they have published books, and their books prove that they're idiots. So, here are your choices. Oh, wow. Inspiring female intellectuals and authors. There should be tons of them. You know what I'm saying? But no, and by the way, again, I'm not saying there were zero. The field I worked in when I was a scholar of Buddhism, There were important women in that field. It's an unusual field that way. You can be in fields that are dominated by women.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
No, no,
scarce. My point is, no, it is rare.
Okay,
and
it's
like
a great
you don't
question
have a lot
here.
of choice. Yeah.
Does having a family preclude women from doing meaningful intellectual work? Yes,
It shouldn't.
that's part of what, you know, it's not just me. A lot of women are conflicted about this issue, and yeah, it's because
I had a newborn baby in my arms, and I was swinging her back and forth to put her to sleep, and it was very muscular work with that particular baby. And I was listening to Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War on my headphones, and I heard the whole of Herodotus, the histories, as an audiobook. You know, actually, I was actually reading Thucydides on paper, listening to Herodotus as an audiobook. I was developing intellectually. And when the baby fell asleep and I put her in the crib, I did bench press, I did push-ups, I did upright row. I was working out physically, I was working out intellectually, and I was a full-time stay-at-home parent. I was taking care of the baby, I was cleaning everything at night, I was cooking for my wife. Often my wife would be breastfeeding the baby, and then I'd go and cook in the kitchen. Yeah, you can be an intellectual raising a kid, or you can take it as a fucking excuse to have a meaningless, self-indulgent life. That's what most people do. I mean, for most men, it's money. For most men, it's like, well, I earn money, so that's it. So now I have an excuse. I can turn my brain off. I can have no other aspirations. But yeah, for a lot of women, it's not. For some women, it is money, but for a lot of women, it's not even money. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you challenging me on that. It could be just the kind of influence that I had in school that.
We say it again and again. No, we all repeat this.
Yeah.
Oh, there are lots of positive female. No,
Yes.
like let's look. Sorry, there's some other field where it's not about. That's not about gender. But like some people say, oh well, there are lots of positive atheist role models, and I would say, really? Like like look around. Who are the atheist leaders or something? Male and female. There are other things where I would challenge, like, oh well, let's really think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. That's important to question that.
So look. Everything that is a challenge is also an opportunity. Okay. And look, being born a 6'3", scary looking dude is a challenge. It has disadvantages. And I could be self-pitying and talk about the ways in which it's fucked up my life. And yeah, I've had to deal with police coming at me a certain kind of way. I really have as a young man, back when I was a teenager. I've had to deal with all kinds of hostility and being treated like shit by authority figures. Being a scary looking big white dude, it's a challenge. It's also an opportunity. And I mean, look, I think the fundamental message coming out of this video is, if you're born female, if you're living your life female, look at those challenges and appreciate the extent to which they're opportunities. Being a parent is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Raising a child, being a housewife is an opportunity. Being a stripper or being a camp girl is an opportunity. But also, going to university, hitting the books, studying, challenging yourself to reach a level of excellence, challenging yourself not to just be a passenger in history, but to be in the driver's seat, taking an active rather than a passive role, holding yourself to standards where, not everyone gets to be Napoleon in this life. One person in a billion gets to be Napoleon. But, you get to be the Napoleon of your field. You get to be the protagonist of your life. Within your small life, within the small sphere where you're going to influence things, you are going to be the most important person. You are going to have, power and influence and consequence for the people around you, So, take seriously. This is your one life. This is your one opportunity. Whether you become a librarian or you become a stripper, whether you're celibate until marriage or you literally become a prostitute, all the temptations, all the advantages, and all the opportunities presented by the body you happen to be born into, you have to treat them as positive opportunities to live a meaningful life and not let them be an obstacle to the life of the mind, not let them be an excuse for you to live a fundamentally self-indulgent life in which you dissipate the intellectual potential that every single one of you was born with, even if you've exercised that potential so little at this point that you don't know just how far you can take it. You don't know yet what it is that you're capable of.